born not just as a clone, but as the Superman of Young Justice.
Hello everyone, welcome to What If Naruto Became the Superman of Young Justice movie. Before we start, please go support Dragneel Slayer for writing that awesome fanfic. This is the translated version I made. There will be some mistaken character's gender, but of course Naruto is a male. Superman, the Man of Steel, the hero at the head of the Justice League, one of Earth's saviors more than once, one of its most important pillars. Following the orders of the light, CADMUS has launched a cloning project on Superman, producing two very different clones. Project KR, an immature clone of Superman, and the ninth in the chain of the so-called Project S, whom they call S9. Unlike his fellow clone, Naruto chooses not to rely on Superman and the Justice League to fend for himself. He's not a Superman clone. He's Uzumaki Naruto, the Super. Chapter 1. All he knew was darkness, a darkness that accompanied him at all times, not allowing him to see anything, hear anything, or smell anything. He felt nothing, no pain, no sadness, no love. Feelings were foreign to him, except anger. Anger seemed to be with him always, accompanying him in his own darkness, whispering to him in different words, with a thick voice that slowly nurtured him to emerge from that darkness that trapped him, and from which he couldn't escape. He tried and tried to escape the cold darkness, to force his eyes open and flee that place forever. But he hadn't succeeded. His strength was weak and his will was broken, clouded by that same darkness that was embracing him, unable to do anything at all. He couldn't see his hands, or feel his body, if he was even alive or conscious. He tried to search for his body, to embrace the warmth of feeling alive once again, but he hadn't succeeded. He hadn't even come close to such a feeling. His knowledge of feelings was absolutely nil, if it weren't for the very anger he embraced. He also felt lonely. A cold loneliness that seemed to cling to him like a limpet. But it wasn't absolute loneliness. Aside from that dark thick animal voice that represented his anger, he'd been listening to other voices that explained things to him, that slowly educated him so he could become a true human. He'd learned to read, write, learn biology, science, and geography. He knew about the two world wars that had ravaged the world and about the emergence of the Man of Steel. Superman, the Kryptonian who had been raised on Earth and who rose up as its protector and one of the members of the Justice League, one of its pillars. Apparently, heroes existed in that world, but he hadn't seen them, nor did he know if they were truly heroes, those who performed actions without wanting anything in return. Was Superman really a good person? He couldn't say for sure, because he hadn't seen him. He knew about his features, his skin, his eyes, his suit and powers, everything about the Man of Steel, thanks to those voices that educated him, and sometimes showed him images of what they were telling him. They couldn't show him images of languages, but they did show him images of the moon, the stars, the rivers, the sun, everything those voices could show him, they showed him, and he absorbed it completely, clinging to those images that sometimes invaded his continuous, eternal darkness. He didn't know how long he'd been in that darkness, but to him it was his entire world, all he'd ever known, and those voices were a constant companion that he found comforting. He always wanted to talk to the voices, but couldn't find his own. It frustrated him too much. He wanted to be able to talk to his teachers, to tell them to take him out of that darkness and help him see the blue sky they'd shown him so many times. But his voice was dead. He'd never been able to get a single word out of all the many he'd learned, and he'd stayed there, in the dark, waiting for the voices to return, or for them to show him the sun shining in the sky again, surrounded by clouds or embracing the world beneath his feet. The wait felt like an eternity. He felt his nerves taking over, his anxiety growing. He knew the meaning of nerves, of anxiety. His teachers had explained it to him, as if the definitions were taken from a dictionary, etched in his mind. But one day, the voices didn't come, and his dark world slowly crumbled, with the voice of his anger still in his mind. His ears were filled with a constant beeping, and his eyes, which had previously been unable to see anything, now stared into a blue crystal that held him, a room filled with capsules, and the lights flashing red, guided by the beeps. He moved his eyes around the room, scanning it. He lowered them, examining himself. He saw himself in a black suit, with a huge S on the chest, red as blood, which he didn't understand. That symbol he was wearing was the symbol of Superman, the most powerful being in that world he didn't know. Intrigued, he tried to lift one of his arms, specifically his right arm, but felt restrained. He looked at a hook holding it, preventing him from moving his limb. Somewhat irritated by the beeping, the red lights, and intrigued by the symbol of the greatest hero of humans, he strained his arm, pleased to hear a creaking sound and see the restraint holding his limb free with a single movement, feeling good about himself. Accepting that the restraints wouldn't keep him still forever, he repeated the procedure with his left arm, moving on to the restraints on his legs. Once free, he moved both arms, pushing against the glass. He was surprised to see the door of his capsule ripped open, crashing across the room, leaving a trail of glass and metallic sounds. He moved his right hand, leaning on the edge of the capsule, feeling the cold metal for the first time. Somewhat dazed, he left his cage with a few clumsy steps, blinking, adjusting his eyes to the red light that was filling the space. "Oh, finally free, brat." I was a little irritated by that eternal cold darkness, declared that thick animal voice that had been accompanying him all his life, or at least since he was aware of being alive and had time to listen to that voice, now all too familiar to him. He tried not to let the voice flood his mind, to tempt him like so many other times. He closed his eyes for a few minutes, letting the headache and numbness leave his clumsy body. He wasn't used to walking, to moving freely away from the constant darkness that had always surrounded him, ever since he had his own mind and understood some things. He moved to the table, leaned against it, and picked up a folder with several sheets of paper inside. It felt rough, somewhat old and worn, as if those who had used it had been doing so for years, or even longer. If so, what was in that folder must be important. He didn't think about it for long, placing it back on the table and opening it with one hand, running his fingers over the pages, feeling the feel of paper for the first time. It was strange and exotic to him, yet pleasurable. He could finally use his sense of touch, feel what it was like to touch something real and not imaginary. Soon, his eyes fell upon a sheet of paper with a drawing of a human male body, complete with specifications, placed next to an image of what he understood to be DNA, surrounded by strange scientific terms. The only things he grasped with certainty and understanding were the words clone, Superman, and a name for said clone. S9. Apparently, these guys have recreated your process about 9 times. You're the 9th, the voice explained, taking on a sage tone directed at him. 9 times? Wait, I'm a Superman clone. Ha. For a clone of that god among men, you're a slow thinker, kid, the voice mocked, generating a growing anger in the boy, who closed the folder with a sharp movement, throwing it to one side of the room, scattering the papers on the cold floor. Good, well. Your anger is annoying. Although I am a representation of the anger you feel. Now, brat, look at yourself in that mirror on the left. Curious about what the voice was saying, he walked over to the mirror, standing still in front of it, seeing a young man no more than 16 years old with messy blonde hair, blue eyes, and whisker marks on his cheeks. He was tall, around 6 feet 2 inches, with a well-built body for his age, and was wearing a black full bodysuit with a bright orange Superman symbol on the chest. He had previously thought it was exactly Superman, in red. But now that he saw him in that full-length mirror, he realized his mistake. Following his own curiosity, he raised his right arm, bringing his hand towards the mirror, feeling the cold of the glass, watching as the image returned the same movement he made. Is this me? Ahaha. I won't deny that you're somewhat amusing, clone brat, declared the thick voice in his mind, dripping with mockery. He didn't like being made fun of. He frowned, slightly annoyed by the voice's words. Yes, that's you, the Superman clone recreated for the 9th time. Although there is another clone of that Kryptonian lurking around this place. Clone of Superman. Exactly, kid. The voice in his mind declared, a little irritated, a little thicker. He brought his hand to his head, forced to close one of his eyes. He felt the sounds entering his enhanced ears, slowly filling his mind with the crunching of glass, explosions, and screams coming from the floors above. I see you got it, kid. We're on a level below all that swarm of sounds. Annoying sounds, aren't they? The clone didn't deign to respond. He moved away from the mirror, walking toward the exit door with slow, somewhat unsteady, and stumbling steps. He stopped when he reached the threshold, turning his attention to the other pods. His eyes saw a figure hidden by the glass, but his enhanced vision immediately captured the female form hidden inside the pod. Hesitantly, he tried to move toward it to rescue the girl. There's no time. The voice declared, stopping him completely, without even having taken a single step toward that capsule. He remained completely static, hearing the hurried footsteps on the upper floors, muffled by the sound of the alarms constantly chiming in his head. If you want to get out of this disgusting place, you must do it alone and not linger. He shook his head. He didn't even know exactly who that figure was. He couldn't risk being pulled back into that darkness. He didn't want to be locked away in that dark place again, with nothing but the voices and images his teachers constantly bestowed upon him, so he could learn about the human world for when he was free. He highly doubted he was truly free, as the voices told him. They wouldn't have let him escape the darkness no matter how much he wanted to. He knew it. He sensed it. He took a step back, turning completely around and now facing the door that was blocking his way out. He raised his arm, caressing his obstacle. The door wouldn't open. It seemed like it didn't recognize him or needed some kind of key or access to open it. Use your strength, snot. Following the voice's instructions, S9 moved his arms, placing both hands on the door. He felt the cold of the steel as it ran over his skin and seemed to reach his back. What'd I do? Just push. Good. Leaning all his weight onto his legs, using his entire upper body to force forward, S9 pushed out his arms, slowly denting the massive iron door and dislodging it from its hinges, sending it crashing into the wall across the hall. Now, following those sounds, boogers, the exit is up top, I'm afraid. We'll have to move, the question is, which way? S9 walked slowly out of the room, staring at the hole he'd left in the opposite wall, thanks to the impact of the door he'd pushed. Slow cracks had formed in the hollow, and the door fell heavily against the floor, creating a constant echo that echoed down both sides of the hallway. I think I know where to go. As long as you get us out of this place, move wherever you please, snot. Us? You almost talk as if you were someone alive. Of course. Doubt offends, you ungrateful brat. The voice in his mind growled, echoing deep within his head. Slowly, he began walking down the hallway, taking the left side of it. He touched the wall beside him, caressing it, recording the rough cue in his mind. If we go upstairs, you'll have to fight. I know. And you're going to do it willingly, snot. He didn't answer the last question from that voice in his mind. He still didn't know who or what that voice was. He felt its anger, its hatred, its darkness as his own, and that's why at first he believed that voice was merely his anger speaking to him. But feelings weren't alive. They couldn't speak freely to people, could they? Or even before he went out into the outside world, had he fallen into madness? He was a clone of Superman, the most powerful being on Earth. A poor copy of the hero beloved by humans. He clenched his fists, feeling anger slowly rise inside him, clenching his jaw. I'm not going to be one of your copies. Yes, you've probably guessed it. This story will have a harem. Yes, surprising, right. It will be a harem with 5 girls already established from the beginning, always giving more priority to the story than to Hex. Yes, I'm sorry, they won't have Hex every now and then, and the girls won't fall at Naruto's feet, I'm sorry. This story is centered on Young Justice, the animated series, and will give way to the Titans led by Dick Grayson, and will be the basis for a mega crossover between Naruto the Red Hood, Naruto the Super, and Naruto the Green Lantern, called Crisis on Infinite Earths, based on the comic of the same name. I also bring the following news. Anbu will end in the next 10 or 15 chapters, and there may be a second season. Naruto Demon Slayer will end around chapter 80 or 100, depending on how much the story is stretched out, and it could lead to a sequel if you wanted, leaving the prequel on hold. My stories will no longer have chapter names, as I sometimes have a harder time thinking of the chapter title than the chapter itself. Weapon X will probably end in 10 chapters, and given how great the game is, there could be sequels if you want. Son of Thor could get a reboot, given that it got out of hand with the Secret Avengers arc and My Poor Game with villains and story, leaving MJ as Naruto's girlfriend if you're interested. The Edge of the Sword will end in its next 10 chapters. The 10th Titan might be cancelled unless they find a way to continue the story or create a reboot, since I don't know if I went too far off topic with the story. With all this, I would like your opinion and understanding. Now, the short harem. Supergirl Kara Danvers. Artemis Leanne Kroc. Batgirl Barbara Gordon. Zatanna Zatara. Wonder Girl Donna Troy. This will be the harem, and there might not be any changes, since I think it's the best I've been able to achieve and the one you've helped me achieve. I'm sorry if you're disappointed that I'm doing a harem story, but I've been thinking about it and I do want to do at least one, to see if I can really strike a balance between story and romance with more than one girl. But give me a chance. When it comes to making stories, I don't think I've disappointed anyone if people keep reading, so I want you to give this story a chance. Cheers. Chapter 2. It should have been a simple mission, a simple test to show their mentors that they weren't children anymore, that they could handle villains on their own, and that they needed the recognition they deserved, as Green Arrow's partner had made clear when they went to the Hall of Justice, where they would take the first step toward becoming League assets for future missions. It was a small step, but one that was too important for them. It was at that moment that Red Tornado had reported 2 possible targets. A fire at CADMUS and an armed confrontation, which had forced the League to leave the controlled fire in the hands of the civilians and march towards the armed confrontation. But being sidekicks to the heroes, they wouldn't pass up the opportunity to help people, especially when Batman pointed out that there was something strange at the CADMUS research facility. Being a likely target of the Justice League, they couldn't put it off for any other time. It was perfect to show them that they were heroes as much as any official member of the Justice League. Robin, Kid Flash and Aqualad took the mission of the fire in CADMUS on their own, helping the firefighters and saving some scientists, discovering in the process the countless floors that were under the facilities, and, following their own interest, the young heroes launched themselves into the adventure, investigating when they arrived at one of the floors, the different ones discovering the genomorphs that CADMUS seemed to be incubating under the facilities. Finding in the files the different types, as well as other projects carried out by the Scientific Center, among them the KR project. Following their instincts, the boys advanced to a lower floor where Project KR was located, discovering it was a Superman clone, and the heroes were trapped after a brief confrontation. Shortly after being caged, Robin, Kid Flash and Aqualad met the head of Project CADMUS, Professor Mark Desmond. He was also the creator of Superboy and the so-called Project S, a project located too many floors below the surface and which the heroes couldn't easily access. Finally, Superboy comes to the rescue of the youngsters, knocking down Desmond, Guardian and a G-Troll with the iron door, freeing and helping the three heroes to leave those laboratories and warn the League to stop Desmond. But again, that wasn't an easy task. Desmond took a vial of Project Blockbuster and injected it into himself, causing him to abandon his own humanity, becoming Blockbuster and confronting the four young heroes, a situation they were struggling to cope with. Oh, come on. Kid Flash had tried to hit the professor using his speed strength, finding one of the thick arms of the previous Mark Desmond as an immense barrier, being swept to the ground, crashing against the wall, and feeling that everything was spinning around him. The beams, we have to bring them down. Robin suggested, showing a blueprint to Flash's partner, hoping he would understand. Kid Flash shook his head, stunned, but understanding what Robin, the boy wonder, meant. Surrounded by the speed force, Kid Flash charged forward, taking out Aquaman's partner with a crushing blow, returning to distract the Blockbuster using his superior speed, leading him towards another of the beams that held up the room's ceiling. Aqualad. Superboy Robin showed his findings to his two remaining companions with his holographic map, pointing out the beams to destroy. Sounds like a good plan, the Atlantean agreed, looking at the Superman clone. Superboy nodded to his partner, and both he and Aqualad moved to destroy the beams and send the ceiling crashing down on their enemy, taking him out of the game. Robin made the holomap disappear, moving his hand to his belt, waiting to throw some batarangs at the rafters, blowing the place up and burying them all. He just hoped they didn't end up out of the game, or it would be a real problem getting out of the place on foot or alive. But something wasn't right with the plan. They hadn't counted on the intrusion of a new subject. Emerging from the hole formed by the collision of Blockbuster and Superboy, S9 slammed his right foot into the Superman clone as he went to destroy one of the beams, grabbing Superboy by the neck and sending him crashing to the ground with no real regard, only his blue eyes fixed on his enemy, or the one he thought was his enemy. Furthermore, the boy's resemblance to the Man of Steel didn't stop him from pressing down on the boy's neck, cutting off all possible oxygen. Let it go. Kid Flash launched himself at the mustachioed boy, running as fast as he could. Both Aqualad and Robin opened their eyes when the second Superman clone caught Flash's partner with his free hand, effortlessly grabbing him by the neck and lifting him off the ground. In just seconds, the intruder had disarmed two members of the poorly formed team, leaving the remaining two to deal with Blockbuster, who hadn't stopped for a moment. I just have to squeeze a little. Are you really going to do it? The thick voice declared, laughing dryly as the blonde clone frowned, feeling Superboy's neck give way under his grip. There are other things to worry about now. S9 looked up, watching the Blockbuster launch himself at him like a rugby player, shoulder first. Releasing Kid Flash and freeing Superboy, the blonde took the onslaught directly, feeling his body jerk as he slammed into the wall behind him. That didn't hurt, he declared mentally, focusing his eyes on his real enemy, watching the Blockbuster attempt to slam into the downed Superboy. S9 brought his leg up and brought it down, slamming it hard into the floor, creating a small seismic movement in the room that gave Superboy time to move, slamming both of his fists into the villain's jaw, nearly knocking him over. At which point, S9 lunged and keyed the Blockbuster, driving it into one of the beams and slamming it into it. Yes, that's what I want. Robin shouted, a little excited, giving a thumbs up. The boy wonder internally sighed, seeing in the second clone a possible momentary ally, even if only for that instant against Blockbuster. He knew Superboy could be taken to Superman, but that blonde. S9 frowned at Batman's assistant's gesture, but said nothing, either inwardly or outwardly, fixing his two blue eyes on Blockbuster's figure. He closed both hands and braced himself, seeing his tough enemy back on his feet. He didn't wait for instructions or stop at Robin's shout. S9 slammed into Blockbuster hard, knocking him out of the building, crashing him into one of the fire trucks near CADMUS, and launched himself into him. Again and again and again, unleashing a bit of his own inner rage on the former scientist in charge of CADMUS. Kid Flash. Superboy. Aqualad sprang into action, activating his swords and turning them into a whip, withdrawing the firefighters nearby from the confrontation. Get the civilians out of the area now. Kid Flash moved, grabbing two men and moving them from the scene. Following the actions of both Aqualad and Kid Flash, Superboy grabbed the remaining men in one swift movement, while S9 slammed the Blockbuster's face into the fire truck, creating a fiery explosion. He's a little out of his mind. The blonde clone attempted a 10th blow to his enemy's face, showing his somewhat sharp teeth, the marks on his cheeks more pronounced, and his left eye blood red, its pupil slitted like an animal's. But Blockbuster parried the blow, landing his own blow on the right side of S9's face, slamming the boy into a random car. Blockbuster emerged from the burning iron and flames, walking with some difficulty. He felt the blood dripping from his face, falling to the ground as he walked. Superboy saw this. The clone launched himself at Blockbuster, trying to save his fellow clone. But he was repelled by Blockbuster himself, who swept the dark-haired man away with a sweep of his arm. Superboy crashed into the concrete, leaving a small gap in the street. That instant in which Blockbuster hit Superboy, he was taken by S9 against Blockbuster, launching a straight to the villain's stomach, followed by a quick grab on the face of his opponent to crash him into the ground with a push of his own arm, without fearing if he crushed the professor's head with his superhuman strength, sprinkling the ground with the villain's blood. That's it. You destroy it. Is this okay? If you don't do it, someone else will, brat. A villain shouldn't be forgiven just like that. Especially not one who could destroy Superman with his inventions and create an evil clone, the dark voice in his mind expressed. And he accepted the words of his companion, or his dark side, the representation of his own anger. S9 circled around the downed Blockbuster, grabbing him by the head and neck. He had Superman strength, albeit less so, and what he was about to accomplish wasn't something he couldn't handle. Blockbuster was a danger to himself and the entire world, with a mind that could lead to the world's destruction. You just have to turn the guy's neck, that's all. A little bit of extraordinary strength from you and that's it, Snot encouraged that voice in his mind, again dark thick, animal. And he followed instructions, without fear, without hesitation. He tightened his grip on Blockbuster's head and neck and, without even flinching, in front of the other four young heroes, he twisted the former Mark Desmond's head with a somewhat forceful jerk, letting the crunch echo for at least 100 meters around, snapping his neck without fear of retaliation, hearing in his mind the dark laughter of his tenant. Although he didn't know he was a tenant and believed it was merely his alter ego, his darker side. He dropped Blockbuster's limp body at his feet with a thud. He was hyperventilating, letting out great gulps of air between his lips, while the hero's aides watched him with some astonishment. But you will be. The Qualid stopped Superboy with his arm, earning a dubious look from his partner. No Superboy. Like you, he's a Superman clone, the Atlantean declared, pointing at the blonde. Superboy turned his attention to the blue-eyed man, seeing his suit and the large orange S on his chest, glowing with a frightening intensity. He must be confused, scared. His actions have been driven by rage and fear. Perhaps he wasn't raised like you and has been mentally prepared for other things, the Atlantean explained, releasing his momentary companion. That was brutal. Kid Flash declared, stepping to the side and grabbing the blonde clone by the shoulder, causing him to blink from his blood-stained hands to a young man dressed in yellow and orange. I'm Kid Flash, by the way. Nice work there, buddy. Friend. Vocalizing, the mustachioed blonde blinked at the words of Flash's partner, without really understanding what the young hero meant. He means you've been working hard, Robin intervened, pushing the young Flash away from the blonde. Come on, you need to take a break. You're one of Super's clones, aren't you? Why yes. We'll have to work on speech, Kid Flash inquired, approaching them again. So you're Superboy's brother. The blue-eyed blonde frowned, showing an annoyed grimace at the comparison to the Superman clone. No. He's not my brother, he declared, stopping. Both Robin and Kid Flash looked at each other. I'm not a clone. I'm not Superman. Kid, Robin murmured, sensing the danger. The young Flash swallowed hard and took a few steps away from the blonde clone of the Man of Steel, hoping not to be on the receiving end of his wrath. The boy wondered, then looked at the bearer of the orange S. At least, will you come with us? I don't think you want to stay in this place. And with us, you can have as normal a life as possible. S9 remained silent, considering the Dark Knight's companion's proposal, trying to weigh the pros and cons. If he stayed there, CADMUS would send him back to that darkness that terrified him so much, and he wasn't willing to be completely at the mercy of his masters again. And if he walked free in the world, the Justice League would hunt him down, with Superman at the helm. He also didn't want to be used as a weapon or a replacement for the Man of Steel, so going to serve the government wasn't even on his mind. He wouldn't be used by anyone to do whatever they wanted. Except the talking traffic lights offer. It's the best thing for us, right now. The blonde clone nodded to himself, accepting the words of that dark voice and looked at Robin, who had been the one to offer him the possibility of a quiet life. Okay, I accept. Chapter 3. When the three heroes' sidekicks and the two clones were informed of their transfer to Mount Justice, the former smiled at the information provided by Batman himself, who kept a cryptic eye on the blue-eyed blonde, the so-called S9 in the CADMUS data, the organization that had kept the Genomers under a thick veil, with no one outside the facility knowing about them. But with the interference of Robin, Aqualad, and Kid Flash and the release of Superboy and S9, the integrity of the facility was compromised. That there was a second Superman clone was something unexpected by the Justice League, and especially by Superman himself, who disowned Superboy when he showed the huge red S on his chest, as if they were family. The Man of Steel left without even looking at S9, who had kept somewhat apart. He had been the one in charge of killing Blockbuster with his own hands and had not felt any real remorse. The voice in his head didn't help much either remaining silent or declaring that it had been necessary. If that monster had escaped them in its madness, many innocent people would have been hurt. Following the initial investigation upon their arrival, the Justice League took the clones under their wing, bringing the 5 youngsters to Mount Justice and forming the Young Justice team. This was something the young helpers hoped for, but it was of interest to Superboy and of little interest to S9 himself, who hadn't mentioned or shown any joy. Unlike the Superman sticker, he wasn't someone who would follow in Superman's footsteps on his path to justice. I'm not a clone. That thought had been lingering in his mind for the next few hours as he stared at the ceiling of his room on Mount Justice, not really sleeping a wink. He had lain awake through the night, his head pressed into the pillow, trying to understand why he was a Superman clone, why they had tried to indoctrinate him to be Superman. He wasn't Superman. He was a young man with no name, no past, no real life. He didn't want to be a clone, a tool without feelings. I will not be Superman's replacement. The blonde-haired boy was ready for it. He had it burned into his brain, suppressing the voices that had raised him for years, indoctrinating him to believe he was Superman, to best the hero in battle, to take his place. It wasn't something he would do willingly, nor was it something he would do under duress. So stubborn, kid. He still didn't know the most obvious things about that world, but what he did know was that few normal humans heard voices in their heads, much less one so thick and dark, hardly associated with a being of good intentions. But, all the same, he wasn't a normal human. He had the body of an athletic teenager, but he had been born only a few days before. 2, to be exact. And since then, he had killed a villain and had been locked away again, only now not in a capsule, but in a secret base hidden in a mountain, alongside his brother, a clone of a renowned superhero. At least that Batman isn't studying us. Batman had stayed with them on Mount Justice, as if he could keep them under control if they got out of hand. Superboy could be stopped with the green kryptonite that affected Superman so much, rendering him totally vulnerable. But it didn't affect him. The Genomorphs had studied him, placing him inside barrels of kryptonite and leaving him there for a while. His vital signs, which had been studied by the same Genomorphs and the Guardian, hadn't changed for a second. He seemed to be immune to the weakness of the Great Man and his clone brother. That would be an advantage over his enemies if he ever wanted to escape that hero base. He wasn't going to tell anyone there about it. Are you a rebellious child? Confidence doesn't kill, man. I don't even know who you are. I can't trust someone I know nothing about, who only speaks through my mind, the young man said, turning over in bed. He kept his eyes closed, as if he were trying to imagine something or just pretend to sleep or rest his body. But he wasn't tired, and sleep hadn't come to him yet. He closed his eyes so as not to see the darkness that surrounded him outside. My name is Kurama, the king of demons, growled that dark voice, sounding somewhat louder, cavernous. S9 shuddered slightly at hearing it inside his head, as if it were rumbling. And I'm not speaking to you through your mind. This is locked inside you. Some idiot thought it was a good idea to experiment on me. What are you? A being of immeasurable power, child. That's enough. The voice faded away, leaving him completely alone again, as if it had never been there. He was used to hours, days without hearing a voice. A few minutes of silence wouldn't really be a problem for him at any time. He even enjoyed them, being able to gather his thoughts and clear his mind during that time. Although sometimes he got carried away, reaching for thoughts that were too deep, and he couldn't help but hate his surroundings. Knock knock. S9 opened his eyes at the light knock on his door. Was it Batman? Superboy? He didn't even know exactly what time it was right now. He'd kept himself locked away, lost in his own thoughts and memories. Crush. The door opened, revealing a woman with golden hair and calm blue eyes. That woman was the heroine Black Canary, a member of the Justice League and partner of the hero Green Arrow, with whom he had shared happy and sad moments. Can I come in? Canary had been assigned to be the instructor for the youth group when they were officially formed in a few days. Batman hadn't informed her yet, but it was official. She would be in charge of looking after those young people, teaching them what it meant to be heroes and how to deal with their personal problems. Taking that silence as an affirmation, Black Canary entered the room, noticing that it was empty except for the bed. Superboy had taken some things, with Robin's advice, but the boy hadn't. Here, he held out his arm, holding an ID. Without really wanting to, the blonde took it and saw the name on it. Uzumaki Naruto. Kid Flash chose the name for you. He didn't tell us where he got the inspiration. The boy took the ID Black Canary was handing him and looked at her. He could see her slightly tapered face, devoid of any fat, with marks on her cheeks and her two blue orbs staring into the camera that captured that moment. She showed no joy, no emotion. She was completely flat when she was photographed. That man has been in charge of creating your profile, Superboy's, and Megan's, John's nieces, the heroine informed, observing the boy with some concern. If everything was difficult for Connor, it would be even more difficult for that boy. He didn't seem to really fit in or want to fit in with the team, despite having accepted Robin's offer to join it. Your name is Uzumaki Naruto, an orphan boy from Tokyo, Japan, hence the name. Fine by me, the boy muttered, still frowning. He didn't know why he had to hide. Didn't everyone have powers? Weren't they all superheroes? Anyway, what do I need this for? It's not like I'm ever going to get out of this place. It's practically like being under the care of the Justice League, I guess. Is that what you think, Naruto? Black Canary declared, looking at the young man with concern. It wasn't good that he was trying to self-destruct, as if he were sabotaging or inducing himself to think that everyone would be like CADMUS and keep him completely captive, shrouded in darkness. Dealing with an enemy or a comrade along those lines would probably be dangerous not only for them, but for him as well. Naruto the heroine forced the boy to look at her with her voice. Sky blue orbs and sapphire blue orbs connected for a few seconds. It didn't take Canary a second to see the glimmer of fear, incomprehension, confusion at everything that was happening. Uzumaki Naruto, a Superman clone who had been released into the world after spending years in an incubator. He must be feeling alone, confused, and scared. None of us is forcing you to stay on Mount Justice, hidden from the entire world. You can leave whenever you want and observe the world for yourself, never through images again. Uzumaki Naruto. Maybe I like her, he thought, looking at the identification that all living beings on that planet apparently wore. Black Canary wasn't unpleasant to him. He liked her, and her voice was truly comforting, almost like a mother's voice, although not better than how a mother should speak. The basic concept still eluded him, and he struggled with simple things, even though he knew them perfectly. But he couldn't really put them into practice in a simple way. So I can go out? He murmured, without taking his eyes off his ID, looking at his own face printed on that card that read the name Uzumaki Naruto, born on October 10th. Yes. Surely Wally would be willing to take you and Connor to see a little of the real world, she declared, now giving a small smile. With Connor, things seemed to be somewhat simpler. After his first teamwork with Megan, the Superboy had taken some interest in the Martian, as well as camaraderie with the others. But Naruto had remained aloof, as if he didn't want to be part of the group on his own. They accept you, Naruto. Even Connor does. Naruto clenched his hand, closing his fingers around the ID. Any more of his super strength or a careless attempt and he really would have snapped or bent it in half. Well. Black Canary sighed, sensing the neutralization of that sigh, as it seemed the boy was truly trying to give a little more of himself. But it was truly a long process. Quite unlike Connor, from what Naruto himself had told them, he was indoctrinated to eventually replace Superman, seeing constant images of the Man of Steel saving people and being the hero he was, with the intention of using the boy as a true substitute for the Man of Steel, who would end up supplanting him and serving his masters. Something they hadn't achieved thanks to that voice that appeared in the boy's head every so often. Connor hadn't had to endure a brainwashing attempt. Naruto, on the other hand, had endured it for years, standing firm against CADMUS's relentless brainwashing, its attempt to completely control him. That man had been amazed by the boy's mental defenses. She had been amazed herself. Even they, adults and heroes for much longer, would have struggled to stay sane after years of being coaxed into being someone they weren't. They would have fallen within a few months, at best. Probably within a week, they would have been convinced they were someone else unless they had some mental protection in place. Black Canary let out a heavy sigh, taking one last look at the room and the young blonde man inside. Why was life so cruel? A young man shouldn't be subjected to any kind of torture, and CADMUS itself was playing God, creating life from scratch like Connor and Naruto, two boys who didn't have to bear the burden of being copies of someone they didn't know. He sighed, walking towards the door. So, the blonde man's voice stopped her, right on the threshold. Canary turned, looking at the boy directly. His face was scrunched up, as if he were thinking about something difficult for him to assimilate. I can go anywhere. Is that okay? Black Canary gave a slight nod. It was almost like dealing with a small child who didn't understand much about the world. He was clearly scared, but she, as the team's instructor, had to be able to deal with it. She had to help him adjust, make him forget what CADMUS had done to him his entire known life, keeping him in a capsule for years. That wasn't right. Yes. There's no problem at all for you to leave the base, she declared, giving a slight smile directed at the Superman clone. Unlike Connor, Naruto had actually been induced to be Superman. Well. Come on, Canary said, looking at the boy. Naruto looked up, staring with some confusion at the woman, now standing in the doorway of his room. "I'll take you for a ride. It's fine for me to give out my real identity, but only for you, okay?" Naruto nodded at Black Canary's words, taking one last look at his ID. He put it in his pocket and got out of bed. He really didn't need to change his clothes. He didn't have any clothes to change into. Maybe it's not bad to trust a little. Chapter 4. It was the first time he'd seen people other than the Genomers or the kids who'd rescued him from the CADMUS facility. Though he'd really only escaped from the labs and could have walked away completely unharmed. He was a Superman clone, right? He didn't need protection or help dealing with the dangers around him. He'd been created to one day take over as the Man of Steel and carry the weight of the world on his shoulders. Seeing those people walking down the street, looking at their phones, listening to music on headphones, it wasn't that big a deal. He was amazed by the number of people, how different they were. Yes, he'd been raised in the chamber that had kept him asleep and trained by the Genomers. But he'd never seen so many people in one space as he was now, watching teenagers his own physical age picking out clothes, trying those clothes on, and observing their figures in the full-length mirrors in the locker rooms. For a while, he'd watched indiscriminately as a girl, not much older than him, had been changing. He'd seen her naked curvaceous body until Dinah had scolded him for it by grabbing his arm. He didn't understand what he'd done wrong. It was just a naked body, and it didn't look much different from what he had. They were like two sides of the same coin, like animals. Following what the Genomers had taught him while he was in hibernation, humans were omnivorous animals too intelligent and complex for the planet. They had been the cause of wars, forest devastation, and famine in the developing world. Why did nature let humans rule the planet? They only seemed to lead it toward its own destruction with their ignorance and senseless clashes with each other, guided by ideologies that ended up creating a schism in their society. From that point, he understood that he wasn't human. He was a Kryptonian with human blood, created by CADMUS to one day replace Superman if necessary, like Superboy. Or even to replace Superboy. He wasn't entirely sure, but it seemed he was being used as a replacement for the replacement of the Man of Steel. Without anyone to confirm it, he couldn't really be sure, but it was the best path his mind had come up with. After the incident at the clothing store, Dinah Lance, aka Black Canary, had dragged him to the men's section of the same store, making him try on clothes for her like Robin and Wally had done with Connor a few days earlier. He simply agreed, not understanding why clothes were so important. Would they save his life in combat? They were simply fabrics he used to cover his nakedness. A nakedness he himself didn't care too much about showing. It was just another body in a world full of bodies like his. Well, not exactly like his, but very similar except for the fact that bullets or normal blows wouldn't do anything to it. Even kryptonite was out of the question if Kurama was willing to help him with his own energy. He was practically the perfect Kryptonian, with no flaws that he knew of. When he finally managed to escape the store and the strange looks from the local customers, he had completely changed his clothes. He left behind the borrowed clothes Wally had brought him. A black short-sleeved t-shirt covered his torso, along with worn-out jeans on his legs. Black and red sneakers covered his feet. Over his t-shirt, a hoodie covered him, allowing him to slip his hands into the pocket itself. Naruto sighed, feeling the bags pulling down on his arm. It wasn't a problem for him, as he could stop a train with his bare hands without really breaking a sweat. Being human is complicated, he acknowledged slowly, looking at the passers-by who weren't looking at him. They were all focused on their phones, staring at the screens of those devices that seemed to absorb their lives completely, as if they were draining their souls. Mere puppets in the hands of that technology. He let a sigh escape his lips. It wasn't worth wasting time trying to understand a human's actions. They were erratic, very complicated for him to understand. Uzumaki Naruto, formerly known as S9, blinked about 5 times before turning his head when a hand was placed on his shoulder. Dinah Lance was looking at him with her blue eyes, lighter than his own. She kept a serene, understanding face, like that of a mother towards her son or that of an older sister. She knew of the changes Naruto had to make. Escaping from CADMUS and teaming up with strangers like the assistants must have been complicated for someone who had grown up together, frozen in time and kept out of the way of everything, always being trained as just another weapon. He saw Naruto as a completely empty shell. He had knowledge of everyone. He had seen everything CADMUS had shown him. But he hadn't lived his life. He hadn't forged his own path, his own character. Right now, Naruto was a child in a teenager's body, someone almost an adult. "Come on. We're done here," she said calmly. She could see the slight confusion in the sea of blue that the boy had for eyes. He didn't seem to understand most simple things and seemed to need some guidance for a while. Unlike Connor, Naruto had been raised to be Superman, to replace him from the start. While Superboy was slightly led toward that idea, the second clone of the Man of Steel had been led directly to being Superman. "Do you want to eat something?" The two ended up at a simple ramen stand. Dinah had tried that food with Oliver when she'd accompanied him for a time in Asia, carrying out light missions for the League and stopping the Hive and other small terrorist groups. The heroine ordered a vegetable ramen while watching the boy furrow his brow. He seemed hesitant and confused about what to eat. "I suggest the miso ramen." The charming waitress pointed to the menu. Naruto blinked at the stranger's gesture, reading the lips of his companion in that establishment. Thank you." And he handed the menu to the young waitress. She gave a slight bow and left to take the two blondes' orders. Naruto followed the waitress's movements and then focused his gaze on Dinah. "So why didn't you join the team's first mission?" the woman asked, brushing away a few strands of hair that were falling over her eye. She examined the boy. Hard, toned body. Without even training once, Uzumaki Naruto was far more toned than any other hero. Strong arms. Toned torso. "I didn't see the need for it," the boy replied. He seemed bored. Meeting for lunch. Getting something to drink. Such trivial things didn't enter his mind. Wasn't there a society based on superheroes? He simply didn't understand. There weren't many people with powers, as far as he could see. "What do you think about the others?" Dinah tried to probe, moving her eyes over the Uzumaki, scanning his face, seeing his features, the twitching of his facial muscles. "The one you seem to get along with the best is Wally. It's funny. It almost seems like she's going to be your mate," she declared, giving a slight chuckle at that. Naruto raised an eyebrow, not quite understanding the woman's words. "I don't understand that." Dinah then let out a second laugh, this one less light, more energetic. It was too much fun to tease a boy who barely understood the world. "You're too naive, Naruto," she declared softly. The waitress placed two steaming bowls of ramen, one in front of the woman and one in front of the young man. Naruto wrinkled his nose, catching the scent of the recommended miso ramen. "You may use this if you wish." Naruto looked over at Dinah and watched as she handed him two small sticks. He took what the woman was handing him and looked at them with slight doubt. Knowing what he was thinking, Dinah took the chopsticks and began to eat her vegetable ramen, moving the chopsticks around and scooping out the noodles. The Uzumaki watched as the heroine ate her food. He looked at his own hand and the chopsticks he was holding. He adjusted the utensil and tried to pick up the noodles with them. He really was a rookie. He frowned, feeling the broth splash onto his hand as the piece of hollow fell into the same broth. He sighed, swallowing his frustration. The simplest things, like chopsticks or feelings, were beyond his grasp. They were beyond his control. Again. "Why didn't you want to join the others on the mission?" Even Megan did. Dinah asked that question again, taking a few more noodles afterward and observing her student's face, examining it with great care. She didn't want to end up getting hurt or hurting him if she could. It would be a real pain to deal with an angry Superman clone. Naruto savored the flavor of the miso ramen and patted himself on the back when he managed to use the chopsticks properly. "I don't like Megan." Nor to the others at first. Naruto frowned. He had his chopsticks right on his lips, cupping the noodles they'd eaten and were now in his mouth. Megan, the hero and niece of the Martian Manhunter, had tried to enter his mind, to take the privacy he'd worked so hard to create. Even with Kurama in his head, Megan was being far more invasive than that dark voice. "I am not invasive." She snorted through her teeth, moving her chopsticks to pick at some beef. It seemed the waitress had left a little extra meat. Or at least that's what Dinah saw at first glance. It seemed the boy attracted attention from the feminine side. Even some men seemed to look at the boy more than her, and that was a pain to her pride as a woman. But Uzumaki Naruto's body certainly attracted attention. It's intrusive. Megan was raised on Mars with the ways of the Green Martians. Everything is different for them, and they can't understand our concepts very well. "The weak human concept," the blonde muttered calmly. He had finished the noodles. He put aside his chopsticks dipped in broth and took the bowl with his left hand. He began to drink the rest of the bowl, leaving it empty. That miso ramen was absolutely delicious. "True. You're not completely human. Kryptonian. But like Clark and Connor, you're unfamiliar with Kryptonian ways," Dinah stated quietly. She also finished her own bowl of vegetable ramen. She placed her chopsticks down on the bowl. "But one way or another, you really do look human. Megan, on the other hand, has to transform her appearance to blend in as one of us. For you, it's simpler. Your body is like a human's. Aside from the fact that you look like you're made of steel, your superior strength, and how extremely steady you seem compared to other humans, you're practically the same as a normal person. There's nothing different about you unless I try to hit you or you use your superior strength." He nodded slightly, pondering the words Dinah Lance had let fall into his ears. He felt different from normal humans. He might be human on the outside, but inside, he wasn't entirely sure he was as human as a person, like Dinah herself. "I understand. Would you be a little nicer to Megan and the others, Naruto? They might save your life sooner rather than later," Dinah declared, thinking about how Megan had dealt with the robot that was the test of the team, as Batman had dubbed them after forming them. Well. That was a vague answer that wouldn't answer the woman's question. Dinah knew it. Naruto wouldn't give anything at all unless he finally opened up to the others. But how to make someone created to be a weapon open up to others? Only dedication and time would finally find the solution. She had to accept that good on his part and see it as a step forward. It was true that Megan didn't get off on the right foot and was almost pushed aside by the rest of the team members. She saw it in the recordings and interviews she had with the boys. But the team had made slight progress after the first test and everyone now showed some camaraderie. All that was missing was for Naruto to finally open up a little more and trust his teammates and teachers. But still, that was a step toward the future. Dinah placed the money on the table and looked at the boy. She didn't know if she had truly made a dent in the young man's tough armor with that outburst or if it was just another failure. Only time would give the answer. Chapter 5. Letting out a tired sigh, Dinah Lance placed her coffee cup on the kitchen island, watching with her eyes as a small moth moved around the light bulb that illuminated almost the entire kitchen, bumping against the glass. It seemed hypnotized by the light and didn't seem to understand that it could move freely anywhere else in the house. It could even escape the place and fly through the cold night sky and lose itself among the stars if necessary. The week had been tough and the coffee in front of her showed it. As the team's instructor, she had to keep an eye on them all constantly, staying overnight inside the Mount Justice facilities when they overstayed their welcome, serving as Red Tornado's substitute as the team's babysitter. That wasn't a problem for someone like her. She also babysat for her sister several times when her father was at work, and it was a simple matter. Keeping an eye on teenagers was the easiest thing for her. But clearly, these weren't just teenagers. While Robin and Wally returned to their homes to spend the night, of the other 4 who stayed at the base, 2 were clones of the strongest being on Earth, and one of them belonged to a race from Mars, this being her first visit to the planet Earth, and thus lacking the necessary knowledge about earthly customs for the moment. The last of them was an Atlantean, so dealing with Calder was no problem for her. The boy had been trained by the king of Atlantis himself, the one who represented the seas within the Justice League. Aquaman. Also, unlike his other 3 companions, he was trained with a discipline befitting an Atlantean soldier, so staying calm and focused and not causing trouble was something Calder could do without a problem. The other 3 were the ones who worried her the most. While Megan was calm and didn't cause any problems, Connor and Naruto were the ones who worried her the most and demanded the most from her. Connor had been intractable during the training sessions, always pushing himself and showing that nothing could affect him, as if somehow trying to prove that he was like Superman. The clone seemed to have developed some kind of feeling towards Superman and seemed to need a father figure to help him see that he wasn't Superman, that he was Superboy, someone completely different from Superman, and that he didn't need to be like him. On the other hand, Naruto had slowly integrated into the team, forming a strange relationship with Wally himself, who seemed to have taken a liking to him. Seeing those 2 in the same room was like seeing 2 sides of a coin. While Naruto always gave the impression of being quiet and serious, Wally was constantly talking at lightning speed from the clone's side, telling him the most ridiculous anecdote she had ever heard. And that didn't seem to affect the other boy, who would simply nod at the speedster's words. Still, Dinah wasn't fooled. Of all of them, Naruto was the one who worried her the most. While the boy had begun to integrate due to her pressure, that could have a negative effect on both the team and Naruto himself. The boy had been created and raised to be Superman's replacement, so being relegated to being just another subordinate could create a conflict within the Uzumaki's mind that would lead him to some kind of chaotic state. And that was what she wanted to avoid. With her mind full of work, Dinah picked up the cup of coffee and brought it to her lips, sipping the warm liquid slowly as the caffeine in the drink seemed to quell her sleep. "I need a break." As if God had heard her, hands appeared on her shoulders and a massage began slowly, forcing the woman to let out a moan when a light creaking escaped her shoulders. Just in case, she left the cup on the table. "Those kids must be really tough if you're this tense," a male voice reached her ears, right behind her. "I've never seen you this tense." Dinah only let out a moan of pleasure when the man's hands began to move down her back. She loved those moments and had never needed a massage as much as she did now. She even thought she might break if she continued to tense up like this. Difficult to deal with. Connor seems to be pushing himself too hard. He's not paying attention to practice, and that could end up causing conflict within the team. Dinah leaned forward, falling onto the table and giving the man more room to massage her back and shoulders. Megan's still a child without a firm grasp of our ways. Using her telepathic powers has caused some friction with her teammates. I hope that will soon be put aside. She closed her eyes when both of her teammates' thumbs pressed against her shoulder blades. And Naruto is the one I'm most worried about. He was created to be Superman. He was trained to be Superman. Like Connor, he's only been on the world for a few days. There are things he doesn't understand yet, and that could cause problems. I would hate to hurt the kid if he got out of hand. You're so pessimistic sometimes, Dinah, the man replied, running his hands down the woman's lower back. Connor and Naruto are clones of the Man of Steel, the Blue and Red Scout. They have Kryptonian blood inside them, and I highly doubt anyone could turn them against the League. They'd certainly be a problem if they got out of control, but that's unlikely. If that were going to happen, they wouldn't have come to us directly. Or it could be some CADMUS plan. Probably, the man pressed on the woman's lower back, eliciting another moan from her. He just gave a sly smile, continuing with his work. Batman's already running tests. He took some of Naruto's blood. He seems to want to see if she's really a 100% clone. What are you talking about? According to Batman, it's unlikely that either Connor or Naruto are 100% Superman clones. Kryptonian blood is unstable on its own and could cause problems for young people, the man replied, taking Dinah's shoulders again. It's likely that both of them have some other type of blood inside them, and that's what worries the Bat. Dinah frowned slightly, which was proving impossible with her partner's hands massaging her shoulders. She just wanted to let herself be carried away by the pleasure, but she also needed someone to talk to. Did they both have the blood of other heroes or villains inside them? She asked, looking for the first time since the beginning of the conversation at the man who had started massaging her. Short, dark blonde hair, green eyes like the leaves of trees, and a close-cropped beard. A serious face, marked by mild sunburn from his time on a deserted island, returned a slight smile. That man was none other than Oliver Queen, aka Green Arrow, member of the Justice League and husband of Dinah Lance. That's a likely guess within Batman's paranoid mind. But to be honest, I think he's right about that. If Kryptonian blood is unstable on its own, how did they manage to make both boys? Adding some other blood type and DNA seems the most reasonable, Oliver agreed, forcing his wife to remain slightly prone on the table. He wasn't even finished with his massage, and he knew she might get angry about it. The problem will be figuring out whose DNA both boys have, because we could find they have the DNA of powerful, dark, and cold beings inside them. And I wouldn't want either of them to have the Joker's blood. That would be problematic. Dinah agreed. If the boys had any other blood types, she also hoped they weren't from people like the Joker. That could end up being a problem for the team and the League in the future if they didn't find a way to reverse it. All those who had the blood of the clown would not be good for long. Back to something simpler, Oliver pulled his wife and sat her upright in the chair, placing both hands on her shoulders for a few seconds before moving. He also needed a cup of coffee because he wouldn't be able to sleep anymore. How's the mustachioed boy doing? Dinah let out a sigh, moving her hand to massage her neck, which had previously been massaged by her husband. She had grown somewhat attached to the second Superman clone, whom Wally had seen fit to name Uzumaki Naruto, though he didn't understand why. Seeing how the boy seemed to wallow in his own darkness, she couldn't just stand by and do nothing. She was appointed the team's manager, both in training and psychologically, so dealing with Naruto's problems was her job, in a sense. What she never expected was to grow fond of the boy. When she started talking to Naruto, knowing what the boy had been through, what they were raising him for within CADMUS, she also started talking to Oliver, telling him about the boy, his fears and psychological problems, not understanding how CADMUS could go to such lengths solely for personal gain. Did they have no morals? It was, in fact, Oliver who advised her to take Naruto out of the base on a walk through the city, thus helping the boy learn a little about true human nature and the world in general. Like Connor, Naruto still had much to learn, however, it would be a somewhat slow task that would end with the boy's complete formation, for better or worse. And the first step in the boy's new life was taken when Wally took him on as his companion, taking the clone on several walks around his city, even introducing him to Barry Allen, aka Flash. It seemed the Kid Flash's presence was a great foundation for the life the clone would lead from then on. Or at least that's what she thought. Wally was, in some ways, a good influence on the golden-haired teenager. Slowly, he seems to be integrating with his classmates, she finally answered, snapping out of her thoughts and taking the cup of coffee back into her hands, taking another sip while watching her husband take a sip of coffee as well. It doesn't seem like it'll be something that will happen overnight, but in time, Naruto really will be like any other teenager. Good to know, Oliver replied, taking a sip of his own coffee. There was no way he could fall asleep now. Are we going to? Of course. Then both adults left the kitchen, leaving both cups still with lukewarm coffee on the white table. Batacueva, Gotham City. At the same moment Dinah and Oliver were talking, Bruce Wayne put aside his mask that completely transformed him into Gotham's Dark Knight and sat in front of a huge monitor with a flickering image of a DNA sequence. This sequence was none other than that of the second clone they had taken from CADMUS, whom he himself registered with the name Uzumaki Naruto to create a life for the boy, as he did with Superboy and Martian Girl. Bruce watched with some interest and amazement at the DNA sequence displayed on his monitor. At Dinah's request and knowing the instability of Kryptonian blood, he had used all his resources to study a sample from the boy Black Canary had almost adopted as her son or younger brother. He still wasn't sure what they both looked like, but they really did look like siblings due to their hair and eyes. They could even pass for mother and son. Since Oliver Queen was Dinah's husband, there was nothing stopping Naruto from actually taking their blonde hair and her eyes, slightly darkened by his green. "Have you discovered anything, Mr. Bruce?" Placing a tray beside Bruce, the faithful Alfred threw the question to his young master as he stood up again, also looking at that DNA image flashing on the screen. "Why are you looking at samples from Wonder Woman and Mr. Clark? I also see a sample of yours within the schematic, as well as some smaller ones." Bruce then came to, blinking and swallowing. He'd expected to find something quite different within Naruto's DNA, but he was hit with a real shock. "It's a request from Dinah," he replied, tapping a key with his index finger. A second later, a download bar appeared on the screen. Whoever created Naruto used DNA not only from Superman, but from Wonder Woman as well. "Even I appear inside the boy," he replied somewhat calmly. He couldn't really be too calm. Who would use their DNA to create a clone of Superman? What real purpose had they had in gathering all those samples into a single clone? The man snorted. "I must meet with the others at the watchtower. Both Superman and Wonder Woman need to know about this." And just as he had shed his cowl, Bruce Wayne once again covered his face with a mask that turned him into Batman, the Dark Knight of Gotham. He had just discovered that Naruto was his family. Chapter 6. Sitting around a table, 4 people remained completely silent, their faces downcast and their gazes lost in thought, as if they were specifically remembering something they had experienced or had recently discovered, as was the case now. A 5th person stood at a distance from the table, leaning against the door with his arms crossed over his torso and his head bowed like the other 4. This person was none other than Oliver Queen, prodigal son of Starling City, a billionaire who, like Bruce Wayne, had taken on a heroic persona by hiding his face under the mantle of the Green Arrow, the bow and arrow wielding hero who kept everyone safe and who, for a time, was considered an anti-hero. Other heroes surrounded the table. Bruce Wayne remained silent, his eyes closed, his expression imperturbable, his expression showing no signs of emotion, but letting it be seen through a slight twitch that he was truly thinking about something urgent. To his right, sitting in formal attire and tying her black hair back in a ponytail, Diana Prince, aka Wonder Woman, held her face in a state of confusion and bewilderment, unable to truly let any single emotion dominate her. She couldn't seem to decide how she felt or what she wanted to convey to her companions. What Bruce had told them was strange and, in a way, uncanny. Facing Bruce, wearing much simpler clothing, Clark Kent's eyes were dull. There was no emotion within him after hearing his friend's information, nor did he feel anything about it. He kept his face calm and didn't let his feelings for Connor surface and be reflected in the second clone of himself that CADMUS had created. Finally, Dinah Laurel Lance remained calm, completely calm, analyzing, like the others, the words Bruce had dropped as soon as they sat down at that table. Had she expected them? No, but it certainly wasn't something she couldn't have expected either. If CADMUS had used Superman as its base for creating clones, then using more League members to reinforce said clones was feasible within CADMUS's own plans and the possibilities at hand. The League could no longer lag behind and would have to take the lead to prevent new clones from emerging, like Connor and Naruto himself. So breaking the silence, Diana soon felt the attention of everyone in the room. "Naruto has DNA from all of us. Well, from all 3 of us." Exactly 20 hours ago, Bruce had discovered the information about Naruto in the Batcave that had left them completely silent. CADMUS's geneticists hadn't just focused on creating him to be an exact clone of Superman, but they'd given him DNA from all 3 of them to reinforce his ability to replace any of them, including Wonder Woman herself, even though the boy was a boy. At least, that's what Bruce thought. "The data on my computer was exactly this," the billionaire patted the papers on the table. Once everyone had the information clear, he would destroy those files. If anyone managed to figure out who Naruto was, they'd use him as a weak link. "It has DNA from all 3 of us. Dinah, I'm sorry I called you without." "Calm down," the woman raised her hand to stop Bruce's words. She knew perfectly well what the billionaire would say, and it wasn't of much importance to her. Naruto was being like her son, like her younger brother, and she preferred to know everything about him now, and not at a more delicate moment when he could take it in any way. It would be strange if Naruto had been used to house all of our genes, all of our gifts. "I even think getting everything from you 3 would be a little too much. I still don't understand how CADMUS has kept Naruto stable, counting on more of Clark's genes than Connor himself." Another fact Bruce pointed out to his companions was the difference between the 2 Superman clones. While Connor seemed to have a stable percentage of Kryptonian blood, Naruto himself seemed to have more than his brothers for some strange reason. Had they used Wonder Woman's blood and his own to balance out Clark's own? If Connor couldn't have more Kryptonian genes, why could Naruto? It was a question Bruce had been asking himself since he began analyzing both boys, bringing Connor into the equation when he began researching the Uzumaki himself. The question we must ask ourselves, Bruce tapped the briefcase containing the boy's information again, is what do we do now? The boy has everything we have. He has the powers of Superman, Wonder Woman, and I don't know exactly what CADMUS got from me. But if it's what I think it is, the boy would be too powerful a weapon in the wrong hands. Belle Reeve seems like the best option for the boy, Clark declared, leaving with that sentence his clear and concise opinion of both Naruto and Connor, both clones of himself, and who could be a danger in the future. With Connor we are running a grave risk. If we add Naruto, this could end very badly for us and the team. Clark. Are you really going to leave the boy to his fate? Dinah slammed the table. If she had intended, the scream would have ended up hitting Kent much harder than it did, as she was controlling her own strength to avoid using her power. Clark did not respond. That would be counterproductive, Diana said, letting out a sigh through her teeth. Dinah had told her about the strange connection between Barry's nephew and Naruto himself, one being a blast of pure energy and the other a thick block of ice. The team would miss the boy, and Wally would probably ask about him. And more than once. Have you participated in any missions? No, Dinah answered Clark's question, knowing that Superman would probably use the root of the boy's incarnation to kick him out of the formation. Unlike Connor, Naruto seems to be constantly debating with himself, as if he's talking internally before making a decision. That could cause friction within the team. Connor counts on Megan. Naruto counts on Wally. Connor is more open-minded when it comes to socializing. Naruto, on the other hand, takes sure, firm steps, as if he were walking on thin ice that could break under his own weight, Dinah commented, remembering the conversation she had with the boy. He's afraid he'll harm the team if he gets out of control, or if for some reason someone implanted a control mechanism in his mind. He was raised by CADMUS for years and believes he might have programmed orders. That sounds very like you, Bruce, Diana said, smirking when the man made a slight grimace that was difficult to discern if it was one of distaste or if it could turn into a smile. At least we know what he got out of Batman here. Dinah stifled a giggle. Oliver snorted and turned his head. Clark remained serious, watching his companions interact. But what was surprising was Bruce Wayne's brief quick smile. Understanding what Naruto could mean to both us and CADMUS, it's best to train him, keep him on our side for the time being. I highly doubt he'll leave to serve CADMUS or anyone connected to said lab, Bruce said, the faint smile he'd shown fading away. Locking him up would only anger him, Clark. And someone like him angry would only be a nuisance to us later on, making the team distrust our judgment and breaking all ties between us and the boys. And I'd remind you that the boys have started to grow up, to become independent. They'll be a nuisance if we lock Naruto up without a viable excuse. But he's a potential monster, isn't Bruce? Clark let his words fall out in a rush, angrily. Fixing his dark eyes on his friends, the Kryptonian hardened his gaze as he continued the silent struggle with the Dark Knight. Dinah let out a sigh that was more like a grunt. Oliver immediately understood that she was deeply upset by Superman's words. He, as her husband, had seen the changes in Dinah's behavior after meeting Naruto, after treating him as the team's psychologist and teacher, and after seeing beyond what anyone else in that room had seen in the boy. Naruto wasn't just a clone, but an independent young man, with a life of his own and feelings that were slowly emerging. That was what Naruto represented to his wife. Clark. Bruce, Oliver finally intervened in the conversation after his own internal debates. Well, the boy could be a danger, Clark, he hasn't been a threat to anyone yet. He killed the CADMUS scientist when he used a type of serum on himself, completely freeing the bystanders and the other assistants. If he hadn't, things would probably have ended worse before we arrived, and we'd regret it now, the archer said, looking toward the table and his wife. The boy killed him out of instinct, like he was an animal. Dinah is helping him control himself. Wally seems like a foothold for the boy. If we lock him up as you wish, the inmates of Belle Reeve will probably be the innocent victims of your decision. I propose that some heroes dedicated to mentalism study the boy. If they don't see a danger, that one of us take the boy in and be his legal guardian. By finding a father or mother figure and taking these as his fundamental pillars, the boy will not fall as easily as others would. The first to look away was Clark Kent himself, letting out a breath between his parted lips. For his part, Bruce looked at Oliver, weighing the archer's words, considering them and weighing their pros and cons. If none of you want to carry the boy, Oliver spoke again, seeing Bruce's behavior and Clark's firm refusal, I'll take him in as my adopted son. I highly doubt Dinah will mind. The man looked at his wife. Finding acceptance in her eyes, he looked back at the Trinity, the strongest group within the league itself, the most representative figures, and those who were the pillars of the world of heroes. Well, Diana Prince, slightly embarrassed, composed herself after Oliver's words and the silent discussion between Clark and Bruce. I have no problem taking the boy. It would have been better if it were a girl, given the laws of my people, but I don't think my mother would have anything against her grandson. Oliver looked towards the other two. With his silence, Clark Kent reaffirmed his refusal to deal with either of the two boys who were clones of himself. And it didn't look like that was going to change anytime soon. Well, it's something I didn't expect. Bruce broke the silence with his usual gruff tough voice, taking on the role of Batman even without his hero suit, but rather a regular Armani one. I have no problem taking it for a while. I'm not a good father, but Alfred could certainly give the boy some good advice, as he did with my pupils and me. Now we just have to see which hero will study him. Martian Manhunter? Said Dinah herself, who had remained silent for several minutes while her companions discussed the boy's future. No. The kid might see him as a threat, Bruce said, ignoring Clark's rise from his seat. I'm going with Saturn Girl. Imra Ardeen. Imra Ardeen, belonging to the colony on Titan, Saturn's largest moon, had been Bruce's own choice. Well, he would have preferred to take Dr. Fate, he wouldn't be willing to do so after leaving his post, and he highly doubted the Martian Manhunter would be welcomed by Naruto. Considering her connection to Dinah, Imra might be the most feasible option for all of the men for the boy. We can look for someone else. No, understanding Bruce's point without him having clarified it, Dinah stared at Diana. For some reason, women are more accepting of Naruto. Imra is the best option so far. When the boy opens up a little more, we'll see other options more feasible for him. And with that secret meeting, Uzumaki Naruto's destiny had been firmly set on a path straight into the shadows. Chapter 7. Walking through the empty corridors of the Mount Justice base, three people advanced unhurriedly, but with a firm and confident gait. Occupying the center of the formation, Batman displayed a stern, stone-carved face that everyone would recognize as his normal visage. He wasn't a hero who showed emotion, or who could twist his lips into a smile that wasn't just another grimace that could be mistaken for displeasure or disapproval. Within the League, Batman was the serious, dark, and cold figure who stood out from the crowd. He was also the figure who represented what was right, what someone should truly believe is the right path to follow. If Batman didn't accept something, it was probably because that other option was completely wrong. At his right side, dressed in her black canary uniform, her blonde hair falling to her shoulders, Dinah Laurel Lance walked forward with determined steps and a completely serious look. She was there, along with Wonder Woman, Superman, Arrow, and Batman, at that meeting they had about the boy they were going to see at the Watchtower. She had been taking care of the team for a while, before letting on about the problem that the second clone of the Superman was showing. Unlike Connor Kent, Uzumaki Naruto wasn't opening up too much to his teammates, although with her, he really didn't seem bothered by showing his emotions, and that was precisely why they took Saturn Girl with them, to try to understand the clone or, at least, try to see what was hiding inside his mind, because, very unlike Connor, Naruto always seemed to be debating with himself before making a decision, just like he did before accompanying Wally, Robin, and Calder into Mount Justice and being under the constant surveillance of her and Red Tornado, who didn't seem too unhappy about being in the hands of a group of teenagers. The Batman's left, Imra Ardeen accompanied her two League colleagues, her own thoughts in her head. She had been calm inside her house when Batman appeared outside accompanied by Black Canary. Both heroes had asked her to accompany them, and she wasn't about to refuse. Once inside the ship, she learned that they needed her help to enter the mind of a boy named Uzumaki Naruto, a very strange clone of Superman who didn't seem to have much relation to Superboy, the other Superman clone that CADMUS had hidden in the lower levels of its headquarters. She still didn't understand why they had asked her for help, considering other people better qualified to be around a young man with powers that would rival Superman in the future. She only hoped he wasn't an enemy of Earth or the League in the distant future. Be careful when I enter his mind, Imra, Dinah spoke slowly. She knew her partner was listening to her. Even Batman was, though it didn't seem like he was. You could end up causing him to wreak havoc on the base. I don't want to face him. Is it that difficult? Imra frowned. From what you said, he's just kept to himself. Maybe he's much smarter than the other kids on your team, right? It's like he has a sixth sense. What are you talking about? Batman raised one of his eyebrows. The gesture was hidden by his mask, and not a single muscle on his face beyond that brow twitched. He was good at hiding his own feelings. His time training with Roz had taught him that, and he wasn't even about to give up his own role. He too had his own thoughts about Clark's clone, and not just because he was a clone of Superman, but because he also had his DNA, along with that of the Princess of Themyscira. Thinking about it, Uzumaki Naruto had been created with a single goal that he could think of. To defeat all of them, the three main heroes of the League, and that made him feel a chill running through his entire body, a feeling he couldn't shake no matter how hard he tried. How could they stop him if he had been raised with codes inside his mind? What if he was waiting for a keyword to get going? Batman frowned further at those questions that didn't come out of his mouth, but that remained in his mind for the next few minutes as they walked towards the room where the boy was waiting for them. And he was in the same room thanks to Dinah, who had convinced him to wait for them there. Always keep your words under wraps, Imra, Batman said, stopping in front of the door that separated them from that very special boy, if that word could define him. He's not dangerous, at least not if Dinah's with you. He seems more inclined to talk to women, but we're not 100% sure. Imra moved her mouth in an amused smile that looked like an annoyed grimace. Oh? Well, I thought Batman always had everything tied up before launching into a mission to obtain a target, she declared, letting the mockery reach the Dark Knight's ears. Batman didn't make a gesture, but Dinah could see a slight twitch. It was so slight, she believed it was simply an illusion. Okay, I'll take this. But I don't want anyone interrupting me, okay? The boys are on a mission escorting pieces of an android created by Ivo to different labs. There's no one who can stop your conference with Naruto, Batman explained, now looking at the woman, her face always hidden under the bat mask. But if you have any problems, Canary and Shazam are here to support you. I'll stay in the communications room to coordinate the boys. Batman took a step back and retraced the path they had previously taken. Dinah didn't respond to her partner's words and reached for the doorknob. She turned the handle and opened the door with a small, less than full push. The hinges creaked slightly, and the room she used for her psychological conferences with the team came into view. She scanned the room and looked at the boy sitting on the couch, twiddling his thumbs over his clasped hands. The heroine let her lips move in a warm, small smile, which her companion caught thanks to the fact that he was looking at her at the moment. Dinah studied the boy's face. She captured the scars, the messy hair, and those sapphire blue eyes. If she had one thing to say about the boy being a clone of the Blue Scout, it would be that he wasn't as much of a Superman clone as he was supposed to be. She swallowed a bit and took a step into the room, drawing the boy's eyes to her. Naruto, she spoke slowly, confidently, without taking her gaze off the teenager's face. Dinah walked completely into the room and let Imra enter behind her. Do you remember what I told you? At the boy's nod, Dinah placed her hand on Saturn Girl's back and pushed her into the room with a light gesture. This is Saturn Girl. Imra Ardeen looked at the boy sitting there. Was that the Superman clone? What was the similarity between the Superman and that boy? She let her eyebrows drop and formed a frown of concentration and incomprehension. It's a pleasure. The teenager's voice made both women's ears ring. Dinah gave a small smile, much like the one from the beginning, but this one much more pronounced. So much so that even Naruto and Imra could see it without having to force themselves. Same here, Naruto. Calmly, Imra walked over to the armchair barely 2 meters away from the teenager, sitting down as he slumped into it. She swung her left leg over her right and held the teenager's gaze. Naruto had stern features that, in a strange way, reminded her of Batman and Superman at the same time. His eyes, resolute and full of power, seemed to come from Zeus himself, Wonder Woman's father. Having been hired for that job, she was briefed on everything related to the boy sitting there. He was, oddly enough, a descendant of the League of Legends triad. Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman. However, the boy still possessed some traces of DNA from other heroes, albeit to a lesser extent, and so they hadn't been able to find a connection with him. Batman had informed them that the only way to find those heroes was to see if the boy had awakened powers related to any of them. Hein, Naruto. Imra looked at the boy directly. She gave a calm, confident, and unequivocal look. Naruto returned it, and the woman found resolve. How are you? I guess so, the young man shrugged. He hadn't untangled his hands at any point. I'm here, and I haven't caused any trouble. Wally is fun sometimes. Imra looked at Dinah with a raised eyebrow. Wally West, Barry's nephew. He's Kid Flash. I understand, the heroine looked at the boy again. Why haven't you gone on any missions? You don't seem to socialize much with your companions. Are you uncomfortable? No, it's not uncomfortable, I just know that those missions are not necessary for me. For you? Could you explain that? A sigh escaped the boy's mouth. My instinct tells me my skills aren't necessary, that I should wait. I always listen to it, and that's why I haven't gone on any of the missions Red Tornado or Batman have suggested. And that instinct, does it tell you anything else? Imra began to frown as she got the answers to her questions. It wasn't an instinct the boy had, and while it seemed like a power, there was no one within the league with a similar power that seemed to see the future. He's taken care of me for as long as I can remember, Naruto spoke slowly. He heard the voice mulling over in his mind. His partner kept his attention on two sides. One side was Saturn Girl, while the other was his own partner with that dark thick voice that haunted his mind. He always makes me see what I do wrong and what I can do better. He was the one who told me to come with Robin and his companions. He was the one who made me give in to the League and allow them to bring me to this base that must have become obsolete. Does that instinct give you any ideas? No. He tends to be silent a lot these days. He says it's because I'm not alone anymore, though I'm not sure. I see. Imra turned to Dynalands for the second time. You knew about this? No. But the boy was always ruminating on his thoughts every time he did something. Now I understand it's because of that voice in his head, accompanying him. Dinah shrugged, seeming to dismiss the matter. But she was very concerned. He never seemed to be pushed into doing anything inappropriate within the base, nor did he hurt his companions. Imra sighed. Her thoughts revolved around the voice in the boy's mind. It wasn't a power, a sixth sense or an instinct, as the boy had called it. It was, without a doubt, a second consciousness. Did he have problems with an alter ego? Did he have problems with multiple personalities? Although it didn't seem possible, Saturn Girl seemed to think so. Okay. Naruto, I'm going to enter your mind. Well. Imra sighed for the second time in as many seconds. She looked at the boy and concentrated on her telepathic powers and was soon thrown out of the teenager's mind. She gasped for air and, with wide eyes, stared at the boy. Thick beads of sweat fell down her face, dripping to the ground. What was that? Red eyes. A cruel smile. 9 shadowy figures moving behind that enormous figure hidden in the shadows. It had never been just one voice the boy heard. That was it. The door cut off Saturn Girl's thoughts and made Dinah and Naruto look towards the entrance. The team is in trouble, Batman spoke gravely, his voice thick and dark. They're losing the fight against Ivo's invention. Chapter 8. Inside Gotham Academy, in a huge gymnasium where the students held their physical education classes and other physical activity, the team was facing the villain known as Amazo, an android built by Professor Ivo, who forced the League to confront him. Using the powers of the heroes belonging to the strongest group known in the world, Amazo held them in check for hours before being separated and sent to different star labs, a plan guided by Batman himself. Unfortunately, Ivo located his precious android and recovered it, completely defeating the team. However, he was followed by the Superman clone to Gotham City, creating a fight at the same academy attended by Dick Grayson, the Robin within the team currently. Now in the present, the teenagers were being pressured, forcing each of the boys to fight completely seriously to stop Amazo and be praised by the League itself. But as much as that seemed like a solid plan, Amazo dismantled the idea that they could defeat him. Shifting his form and opening his immense mouth, Amazo let out a thunderous roar directly at Superboy, sending the dark-haired boy crashing into the gym bleachers beside his inventor. The man, a rather normal-looking man, perhaps a standard look for insane teachers like Ivo himself. He laughed slightly as he watched Superboy burst out of the hole, letting out a grunt of discomfort, looking more like an animal than a hero. The problem with the team's defeat. Superboy, or better known as Connor Kent, wasn't really at his best. Annoyed, filled with an animal rage too dense for him, he chased the villain toward the academy where they were fighting, or rather, he was thrown into it by Ivo's robot Minkies and the newly rebuilt Amazo, who punched him straight into Gotham Academy with Superman force, ending up inside the gymnasium where his teammates soon joined him. That wasn't a spectacular idea either, and they were all pressed into combat. Elsewhere in the gym, Kid Flash and Robin groaned in pain as they got to their feet. How had the android transformed so quickly from Martian Manhunter-like intangibility to Superman-like strength? It was physically impossible, and they were outmatched. While Wally might be fast, the flash speed Amazo used actually outpaced him by a full sprint, and he was defeated in less than a blink of an eye. Soon Robin had joined him, and they were both reduced to the floor, sweating, the Dark Knight's companion more so. The boy Wonder was breathing heavily, pushing himself to his feet with great effort. Of all the teenagers, he was the only one without powers who had superhuman stamina like Superboy and Aqualids. And while Wally was human like him, he wasn't entirely human and was trained in endurance. Oh, man. Kid Flash groaned, massaging his head as he focused. A haze settled over his eyes, and he could barely clench his jaw any tighter. What's the license plate of the truck that ran me over? Robin didn't respond to his partner's banter and instead examined the area. As Batman's apprentice, he had been trained in martial arts, strategy, and criminology. Although many didn't know it, Batman himself often acted more like a super detective than a regular superhero. He should have been known as the Bat Detective or something similar, but instead he was known as the Batman, and that's how it stuck. With his dark eyes, the boy saw Superboy emerging from the hole in the bleachers. Professor Cooper wouldn't like seeing his prize gym destroyed, but it was better than destroying the entire academy. That would raise a headache for him with Barbara hovering around him. Putting those thoughts aside, Robin now watched as Miss Martian was overcome by the heat power Amazo had unleashed on both her and Aqualid. Both young men were defeated, trying to get some air and maintain consciousness, something he and Kid Flash were trying to do without much success. How else would they fight someone with all the League's powers? Not even their superiors could deal with the android completely, and it would take them hours. And they didn't have hours or partners to fight for an extended period. All they could do was wait for someone from the league to show up and help them, although it was unlikely. If they could do it, why hadn't they done it already? Snapping the boy wonder out of his thoughts, Amazo began moving towards the downed Miss Martian, walking step by step and leaving his footprints on the ground. Robin fired a few batarangs at the villain, and Kid Flash moved against him, finding the android's hard hand clutching his throat and being lifted a few inches off the ground. NGH. Groaning, Kid Flash tried with all his might to escape that grip. Before Ivo's eyes, Barry Allen's nephew moved his legs so fast that he tried to create a hurricane with them or escape the iron grip he was being subjected to. However, he couldn't do much, especially when Amazo's fist buried itself in his stomach, knocking all the wind out of him and sending him into unconsciousness, leaving his eyes white. Kid Flash was completely defeated. Seeing this, Superboy roared loudly and launched himself at Amazo. The android released the speedster and collided with the perfect body of the Superman clone, generating a wave of wind that shattered the windows, generating a sound of falling glass. Crush them, Amazo. And do it soon. The professor growled, putting aside the amusement he'd found in defeating Superboy with a single blow earlier. There are things to be done. Amazo didn't respond, but the gleam in the android's eyes told Ivo he would follow orders. With a swift motion, he slammed his fists into Superboy's back and sent the clone crashing to the ground, sending up a shower of splinters. Before the clone could move, he was met with a radiation-like power that sent him flying and crashing into the wall. The Superman heat vision, which Amazo inherited from his inventor, was even more powerful than Superman's own when used to kill. Or so Robin saw from his kneeling position. He probably would have died if that attack had been aimed at him. He should be thankful that Amazo was focused on Superboy so he could try to devise a strategy to defeat that enemy. But what could they do? Everyone else was defeated and only he and Connor were still standing. Amazo, losing interest in Superboy, turned back to Miss Martian and walked again, a little faster this time. His inventor had ordered him to kill those heroes and he wasn't going to disobey him. Then, when the android was 5 meters away from Miss Martian, the ceiling shattered and Amazo stood completely still, watching along with his inventor and the boy wonder at that cloud of dust, concrete, splinters and glass that covered the girl. The blur emerged from the cloud and Amazo was completely pushed out of the gym, smashing through the wall behind him, surprising Ivo. The professor sat for a few seconds, staring at the gaping hole in the wall, and as he went to stand up, a gloved hand fell on his shoulder. "Where are you going, Ivo?" Golden hair. Blue eyes met Ivo's dark ones, filled with confusion that turned directly into fear. With a sweet smile, Dynaland stopped the mastermind behind Amazo's escape and sent him back to his seat. The woman was accompanied by Diana Prince and Hal Jordan. "What are you doing here?" the man grumbled, looking at the league members. With a flick of his fingers, Jordan chained the villain with green handcuffs from his ring. "I see that was Superman then, right?" "Not exactly," Hal muttered, moving his arms to cross over his torso. "But hey, let's see how the boy does, shall we, Canary?" Being the older sister and mother figure of the second Superman clone found, Black Canary gave him a piercing look for a few seconds before changing to a completely warm gaze. "Oh, he might," she finally admitted, now looking at Ivo with cold eyes. "Professor." Back with Amazo, the android finally became intangible like the Martian Manhunter, and the figure that attacked him passed through him, spinning and skidding across the ground, engulfed in dust. Golden hair and blue eyes stared into the red eyes of his enemy. With a large dark orange S9 slowly stood up, his hands closing. Amazo fired heat vision at Uzumaki Naruto. The Superman clone raised both arms and covered himself with them, being pushed back. The ground gave way, leaving marks of the teenager's feet as he was pushed. Seeing this, Naruto deflected the lightning bolts with the metal in his arms and leaped forward like a predator. Amazo opened his mouth, sending a thunderous scream toward the hero that slammed the clone into the ground. With his super hearing, his ears soon bled. "Hahaha. You've crashed into the ground." "Horse," the voice of that beast in the clone's mind mocked. Naruto slowly stood up, showing no pain from his bleeding ears. Amazo leaped forward using his super form. Naruto stood completely still, taking the punch straight to his face, a punch that passed him by like a ghost. Before the android could react, the Uzumaki slammed his left fist straight into Amazo's chest, sending him flying into the sky. Naruto flexed his legs and shot into the sky. Amazo spun around and tried to punch Naruto, but the clone stopped the android's fist and slammed it several times against his enemy's face. Spinning around, he sent Amazo crashing to the ground. If Superman has freezing breath. He inhaled air. He inflated his chest with oxygen. When the dust around Amazo crater settled, revealing the android, Naruto let out all his air, firing a flamethrower fully at the android, engulfing it in flames. And he'll become vulnerable once he becomes intangible like that Martian. Amazo slowly rose to his feet, completely intangible. Like a meteor, Naruto slammed his body into Amazo's just as the android reverted to its original form to attack him. In this circumstance, the android exploded into thousands of pieces. Chapter 9. Darkness. Deep and cold, the darkness surrounded everything, completely hiding it from his emotionless gaze. There were no people. There were no buildings. Any sound was completely silent, swallowed by the same darkness that surrounded him. He took a step forward, and then another. His body tilted as his right leg sank completely into something wet. Was it water? Blood? Maybe quicksand? The sound of something moving in that darkness made him raise his face. The figure was ominous, gigantic. It didn't even fit completely in his vision, so he tilted his head back, guided by the body, finding immense red eyes that stared at him with some interest, with a tone of mockery he couldn't identify. Long minutes passed. Blue eyes stared into the depths of blood-red eyes, their intensity undiminished. They were fixed on him, and he couldn't escape that intense gaze. It was hypnotic. He couldn't move without feeling crushed by those eyes that seemed to want to burrow into his core, to pierce and pierce his soul as if it were nothing to him. He felt completely naked before that indiscreet, intense gaze, which, for some strange reason, found no hostility in it, shining calmly, as if waiting for something. He sensed movement right in front of him. From several feet below the shadowy figure, the boy saw its jaws move in a clear attempt to convey something he couldn't hear, even with his enhanced Kryptonian senses. Then he found only light and everything disappeared. Naruto blinked at the intensity of the light shining on him. Concentrating on fully recovering his vision, the Man of Steel clone fully raised his defenses, waiting for any enemy to move against him. The only thing he caught in that situation was the sound of the sofa sinking a few feet in front of him and a female voice asking him something he couldn't decipher, as if the voice was being blocked. That? The clone was surprised. The question he hurled at the woman in the room sounded thick, hoarse, and almost unintelligible, as if it had been spoken by a beast rather than him. What did you see in your mind, Naruto? Imra Ardeen ran the tip of her pen along the page of the notebook resting on her right thigh. The Martian looked at the clone with her intense eyes that never left the bent figure of the blonde hybrid. As a telepath hired by Batman himself to help the boy, she had done something many telepaths would have done at an earlier point. Meditation. Something inside the teenager was blocking his powers to a certain degree and, not wanting to abuse the clone and his trust, she didn't unleash an abusive movement on his mind in order to establish better ties. Therefore, she resorted to meditation, and it seemed that they were reaching a certain point of evolution with this. The figure. Naruto frowned as he felt his temple throb with pain. In the previous sessions, he hadn't been able to make out that figure, much less feel himself sinking into something liquid. The most he managed to achieve were small flashbacks of his moments in that tube hidden from the outside world before being freed due to a failure in the capsule's own system, probably thanks to Superboy's escape. No, I don't remember it very well. I only remember completely red eyes staring at me, hiding a wild world of pain behind that permeable retina. Imra hummed at the information the boy had provided. After the team's mission to Amazo and the need for Naruto on the ground, she had been with the boy every day she could spare, undoubtedly accompanied by Black Canary or Wonder Woman, in case the clone got out of control. She doubted it, but Batman wasn't a man to leave things to chance, and she appreciated it. It was her safety that was at stake being locked up with Uzumaki Naruto, the second and most dangerous clone of Superman. He defeated Ivo's android, Amazo, in seconds. He displayed the detective's ability to become intangible and proved to be much faster and stronger than Connor, as if the speed and strength of Wonder Woman and Superman had been superimposed, giving him more strength. Imra was no stranger to the team's most recent mission and the first officer of the second Superman clone. She had actually met with the boy moments before being called in by Batman to act as backup, though he himself later took all the credit. She had done something that even several members of the League had been unable to accomplish. But Imra jotted the words down in her notebook. She scribbled and looked into the boy's sapphire eyes once, searching for that hint of coldness and madness she'd seen when the clone returned from the mission to stop Ivo. That animal instinct had been kept under wraps after that confrontation, and she wouldn't just bring it up. Anything else? Still having flashbacks. These have mitigated. Once again, she jotted down in her notebook the answer her ears had heard, plus some personal notes on the case. Black Canary was supposed to be the team's psychologist. But she was in charge of Naruto, being able to access his mind in a way. Since her first attempt, she hadn't tried again for fear that thing would lunge at her and rip her head off. She could see that she was capable. And your relationship with your classmates. Without taking her eyes off her notebook, Imra could see Naruto's lips twist and his face twist in a slight expression of discomfort. You've spent a lot of time with Wally, haven't you? Dinah has indicated that your performance with them has improved since the incident with Ivo. Yes, I've been out with Wally and he's shown me around town, just like Dinah did back then, Naruto spoke with slow, steady voices, astonishing Imra with his perfect pronunciation, despite the fact that he didn't usually speak much before. I'd say my performance with them has been improving since I joined them on the last mission. How do you feel about them? Imra asked. She had started on a path she was going to follow, and she would seek out as much information as possible about the boys' relationships. Beyond Dinah or Diana herself, the clone didn't seem too interested in expanding his circle. It's important that you be able to work with them in the future. It's uncomfortable, he admitted. The clone frowned and proceeded to think seriously about that question, trying to somehow find the answer that would satisfy both Imra and himself. But no matter how hard he searched, he found absolutely nothing. The only thing he could think about regarding them was how uncomfortable it was to work together, especially in situations where he could handle himself without the need for a second. I'm used to dealing with things my own way, and seeing how Robin tries to take the lead at every moment, how he seems to have been trained differently than the rest, makes it so I can't really think of a perfect option to work with. Scratching sounds on the paper echoed for a few seconds before silence filled the room again, with Imra gripping the pen tightly in her right hand. You're a key player here, Naruto, Imra said those words, knowing the effect they would have. A few weeks had passed since those meetings, with the boy entering his inner world and with the exhausting confrontations he and the rest were subjected to, each one being carried at their own pace. You were key to defeating Amazo and Ivo, ensuring that no one came out unscathed. You're practically an ace up the sleeve for both the team and the league, and any information the villains might have on you comes down to the CADMUS Project S files, if there's anything worthwhile in files like those. What do you mean? Imra took a deep breath and put aside her notebook and pen. Honor is a Superman clone, Naruto nodded as Saturn Girl's eyes bore into him, like two needles stabbing into skin. You are a Superman clone, the clone nodded again, trying to find the path the woman was trying to take. But unlike Connor, you have enough mentality to not be a hindrance to your companions. I know that perfectly well, Naruto. You take one step at a time, each one taken with confidence, in an attempt to test the ice beneath your feet for the next step. You're cautious, sensible. You don't make a false move, and that may be due to one of those who contributed to your creation and birth. The woman noted that it was Batman himself who was acting sensibly through the boy's body. She saw it in his gaze, his gestures, and how he seemed to analyze everything with his eyes. That's fine, Naruto. When you're ready, the team will be there for you. The door was opened with some force, causing Imra to fall silent and Naruto to raise his head, looking at the young man who had interrupted his session with the Saturnian. Wally, Imra sighed, picking up the notes that were lying on the couch beside her. How many times have I told you to knock? Hey. At least I didn't use my speed force. Wally West looked offended by Imra's words and soon afterward embarrassed by the woman's own eyes. It doesn't matter, Imra sighed and stood up. We're done. You're free for today, Naruto. The boy nodded at those words. Soon, he was tackled by the speedster and felt the weight of the Redeed's right arm on his body, almost pushing him down. Probably, if he weren't practically a superhuman, Wally's enthusiasm would have sent him to the ground had it been any other member of the team. Why the excitement? Naruto looked into Wally's green eyes as they walked slowly out of the room. Normally, your heart isn't racing, and your pulse is within a normal range for you, if hundreds of beats is normal. Are you counting my heart rate? Wally West blinked as that information entered his head. Why? Naruto pointed at his ears. I have better hearing. I can't help myself, even if I want to, he admitted with his usual neutral face. Wally had grown accustomed to that face. It wasn't cold or unpleasant, but neither he nor the rest of the team had ever seen a small smile cross those always pressed lips. It was almost like seeing a copy of Superman, but with messy blonde hair and blue eyes that were the opposite of Superman's. It doesn't matter, Wally dismissed those thoughts for a second and smiled widely. We have a new partner. And you're happy because she's a woman, but at the same time you're unhappy, Naruto saw the debate in the young hero's eyes, even before Wally could say anything about it. Yes, the speedster admitted Naruto's words, his expression quickly changing. But I don't like it. It's because of him that Roy isn't with us. Roy Harper, better known as Red Arrow, was Green Arrow's apprentice and partner until the formation of the team. From what Wally had told him, Roy left his position as Oliver Queen's partner when the league seemed unwilling to grant them free will, and when they formed the team, Roy saw it as a way to control them more effectively. Naruto admitted that he respected Roy even though he had never met him. The boy went his own way when he saw he couldn't grow much more and had been working on his own for a few months now, making Roy Harper a vigilante and a loner. Without full backup, Red Arrow had been doing quite well on his own, getting into the league spotlight. She's not to blame for Roy not being here, Naruto stopped at the edge of the training room. With a shrug, he shrugged off the speedster's arm. The adults were the ones who caused the friction between Harper and the rest, as well as her future decision not to belong to this team. Wally waved his hand. Well, Wally looked toward the living room, we're training with Black Canary. Are you going to join us this time? I'm too interested to see who's stronger, you or Connor. Yes, I will. The speedster nodded and walked inside. Right at the edge, Naruto looked at the team members, trying to find a face to the new member. He felt a stinging bite on his back. Digging his heels, he spun around and faced a girl with golden hair and eyes as green as the forest itself. Accustomed to the green arrow uniform, Naruto didn't notice much of a difference when he saw the archer's outfit covering her toned body. And you are? Artemis. Call me Artemis. Chapter 10. With a deafening scream, Connor Kent launched himself at his brother in a swift and daring move. Naruto remained in position, watching as Connor moved against him in a succession of steps that his Kryptonian eyes could fully see. He raised his right arm, thus blocking Connor's arm, and passed his left arm under his partner's right, making a key that stopped any movement on the side of the Superman clone, leaving Connor in a vulnerable position. A position that was brought down when Naruto swung his leg in a sweep that completely destabilized the brunette and knocked him onto his back with an elbow strike to the primary clone's chest. Connor rolled on the ground, gasping for air as he tried to get to his feet. While Kid or Robin could give him a hard time with their skills and Calder with his Atlantean strength, it was his brother who pushed him harder due to the similarities in powers they both had as Superman clones. That was why he felt the blows from the blonde Superman clone with pain and how his body shuddered under Naruto's holds during sparring sessions. He came to discover that Naruto possessed much more strength and endurance than himself, something he didn't fully understand. They were both Superman clones, but only Naruto had greater strength, speed, and endurance in the fights they had had so far. Did his brother possess a little more of a connection to Superman? At the unasked question, Connor frowned in mild annoyance. Superman had been ignoring him all this time, as if he didn't exist, as if he were nothing. And, to make matters worse, his brother didn't seem to want anything to do with Superman, even ignoring the League's precursor, as if he were a mere extra in his life. Didn't Naruto want to talk to Superman? Didn't he want to be more than just a clone? Naruto was too strange to him and seemed like a complete stranger despite being a Superman clone like him. What did his brother have that he didn't that allowed him to disassociate himself from Superman so easily? Connor took a deep breath and pushed himself up, finding the blonde Superman clone's blue eyes examining him closely, as if searching for something inside him. This scrutiny made him flinch for a second before he pursed his lips and frowned. That? You were so far gone, Naruto replied calmly. His arms crossed over his chest, his firm posture, and his puffed-out chest made him look like a military instructor to Robin, who, accompanied by Calder, stood admiring the practice from afar. What were you thinking? Nothing. Really, nothing. The blonde raised one of his eyebrows, showing with his gesture that he didn't believe the words she was saying to him. Faced with this interrogation, Connor adopted the same posture as his brother. He crossed his arms over his torso, squared his shoulders, and planted his body a few inches from the blonde, staring unblinkingly into Naruto's sapphire eyes. Are you trying to be a big brother, Naruto? I don't need you trying to worry about me. I'm a super, after all. That's what bothers me, the blonde spoke calmly, picking up on the confusion and doubt that were running through Connor's mind in his brother's response. You're not super. Feeling his vision go red, Connor grabbed Naruto's shirt and lifted him a few inches. He tightened his grip, staring into his clone brother's glowing eyes. I don't need you worrying about me, Naruto, she hissed, gritting her teeth with each word. I don't need. Both of Naruto's hands fell on Superboy's wrists, exerting a tiny force that subdued the teenager and forced him to lower the Uzumaki to the ground again. When he felt the ground beneath his feet, Naruto grabbed Connor's face with his hand in a swift movement and knocked him to the ground, leaving him on top of the brunette and without anyone else from the team or the instructors being able to do anything. Shut up, idiot. Those words didn't sound like a threat. Connor looked into Naruto's eyes and saw no emotion, not even the confusion or irritation he himself felt over everything that was happening with Superman and being a clone of Earth's greatest hero today and precursor to the League. I don't know what the hell is wrong with you, Connor, but leave all those thoughts you have about me aside. Stop thinking of Superman as if he were our father and focus on building your life, on creating Connor Kent and Superboy. The hand left Connor's face and Naruto stood over his brother. We are the ones who decide what to be. I am not a clone of Superman nor am I a super. I am Naruto Uzumaki and you are Connor Kent. We are not Superman. With those last words, Naruto turned away from Connor and walked toward the exit of the training hall. His face was an inscrutable poem set in stone, revealing nothing to either Robin or Calder, who glanced at the blonde before looking back at the downed Connor, considering what they had to do, leaving the two of them to sort out their problems on their own. If they bothered one of the two supers, they would probably be crushed by their sheer force. Naruto stopped in his tracks at the entrance to the hallway and weakly punched the wall to his right, gritting his teeth in the process. It wasn't his fault he was who he was. Why should he cause such envy and resentment in Connor? As Superboy, he was created by CADMUS to be a replacement for Superman, with everything that entailed. Didn't Superboy see that this was hurting him? He accepted that he wasn't Superman and that he wasn't going to be. He wasn't even planning on wearing the S on his chest, if possible, or a name with super in it like Superboy did. He preferred to focus entirely on himself, on being Naruto, and not just a clone of the Blue Man. But even if he had accepted himself as something more than a Superman clone, that didn't mean Connor had accepted and distanced himself from Superman. That attempt at a relationship his brother was trying to form could be the end of Connor himself if he didn't find stability for his own emotions. $1 for your thoughts. Naruto opened his eyes and took a step back at the female voice. Shaking off his stupor, he looked at Artemis leaning against the wall in her green uniform, staring at him with green eyes and a mocking smile on her lips. That? The teen blinked, confused. Artemis laughed quietly, devouring that confusion and scanning the boy's eyes as he stood there reeling in his own mind, probably trying to find a way to express his feelings, which made it seem as though the boy was completely vulnerable to her. You've given Connor a good beating, and not just with the blows. Did I see resentment in the words? Naruto regained his composure at Artemis's phrase. No, I don't resent Connor. Rather, he's the one who has a certain resentment towards me because I accepted what I am long before he did. Naruto ran his hand around the back of his neck, taking the opportunity to look at Artemis. Unlike Megan, Artemis had a more athletic body, much more trained than the Martians. Behind the green lycra that clung to her body, Artemis hid a sterilized and well-formed body due to the training she had done since childhood, and not exactly on the good side of society, something that Naruto sensed the day they met. Don't you train with the others? I don't really need to, she said, shrugging when Naruto raised an eyebrow. Unlike the rest of the team, she didn't need to constantly train with others. She knew how to defend herself hand-to-hand against close-range combatants and preferred to further hone her skills as an accomplished archer, clearly determined to be a good archer on the team, embodying arrow within that small teenage team. Clearly, that was better than the fate predetermined by her father. I've been hitting things for as long as I can remember. I could probably beat you in a couple of rounds. The rustling sound made Artemis's smile grow. Arms crossed under her firm chest, the archer looked at the blonde standing a few feet away. A bright, accepting smile was inviting her to carry out the assault she had verbally promised. I hope you can really last a few rounds, tough girl. Naruto walked past Artemis. Before she could respond, the clone's right hand fell briefly on her head, stopping any words she might have wanted to say. CADMUS. Sala S. Lex Luthor observed the 8 remaining chambers of his Project S, which he kept secret, even more so than Project KR from which he obtained Connor. His eyes never left one of the chambers, specifically the 9th. This tube-shaped capsule was completely empty, its glass shattered, leaving no trace of what should have been inside. As a truly mad scientist, Lex had devoted a great deal of resources to creating a perfect clone of Superman, thus paving the way for Project KR, which made him proud of himself. He quickly managed to create a perfectly stable clone of his nemesis and had him as a replacement for Superman himself when the time came. Unfortunately, the boy was kidnapped by the League, and all of CADMUS was forced to relocate to avoid being detected again or arrested by the members of the League, who had been bothering them for a long time after meeting Superman's primary clone. But like any scientist, Lex had a backup if Project KR failed or was stolen from CADMUS. However, this project wasn't exactly like the previous ones, nor did it have his own DNA to keep the Kryptonian DNA of the next clone under control. Believing that if KR was stolen, all his plans would fall apart, he created what became known as Project S, a cloning project that clearly attempted to surpass Superman himself, thus giving him a total of 10 completely stable specimens with Kryptonian DNA and those of various heroes and villains. However, one of his specimens went out of control and disappeared from CADMUS, following the steps of Project KR, thus falling into the hands of the League and leaving him with about 9 completely unconscious clones in formation. I can't allow one of the S to be stolen, Lex spoke calmly, returning to the present and leaving his own thoughts behind. Accompanied by Guardian, the man looked specifically at the cryogenics tube where the so-called S9 had previously been. I can accept Superman obtaining KR, but not the S9. The clones in this project could ruin our plans. What do you want to do? Perhaps a meeting of the light will bring some understanding to my confused mind. Lex took a deep breath. He massaged the bridge of his nose and exhaled all the air he could hold in his lungs. Keeping clones completely cryogenically frozen wasn't as simple as a normal person would expect. We can't let S9 spend too much time with those young members of the team. We can't even allow Superman to fill the boy with ideals much more than he already has. If he ends up trusting the League, it will be a wall we won't be able to overcome once his powers are fully mature. Then perhaps we should send her, my lord. At Guardian's words, Lex opened his eyes slightly, a gesture that went completely unnoticed by his partner. While he was thinking about how to get S9 back, Lex never considered using her to bring him back. He considered, like every primal being, using one of the other clones in the project, but never using S10 to get the boy back. The man turned to Guardian and displayed a completely pleased smile, which slightly puzzled the taller man, but he said nothing. Lex Luthor smiling the way he did only spelled trouble for other people, and not for Guardian, who stood stoically watching as his employer walked toward the pod labeled S10 and pressed a button on the side. With a click, the glass shifted to let a cloud of icy steam escape from inside, forcing Lex to step aside and watch with Guardian as, slowly, a female figure came into full view as they both gazed at the completely peaceful face of the sleeping young woman. In a blink of an eye, red orbs were staring at them before turning into lavender ones. Good. I think we can take the boy back. Chapter 11. With critical eyes, Naruto looked at the Gotham Academy uniform he was currently wearing, which barely kept his body covered in that thin, annoying fabric that squeezed his body in a half-baked attempt to keep his muscles completely under control. Even the clothes he wore at the base were very tight on his body, and that's despite Dinah trying to find a perfect size for his muscular body without going too far, because after just a couple of tries she gave up. Therefore, if Dinah hadn't managed to get clothes that were comfortable for him, he highly doubted that the academy could provide him with a uniform that would actually allow him to move freely while walking through the halls of that prison. Yes, the academy was a prison for someone like him. Why had Batman had to send him to that place with a scholarship for his studies? He could have easily been with the others at the high school near the base and not have to move around with the Z-tubes in order to attend hell for that entire school year. And he also had to do it completely alone. The young clone tugged on the strap of his backpack and secured it securely on his back before starting to walk toward the main entrance. He soon felt the eyes of curious onlookers and heard the murmurs of teenagers as he walked past, a piece of paper in his left hand. As a freshman student, he had to go to the principal's office to get his schedule and directions to his class, as well as turn in all the remaining paperwork that would complete his Batman-created identity, which reflected his current name. Naruto Uzumaki, or, as they preferred in his home country, Uzumaki Naruto, with the last name before the first name. Following the theme of Wally's given name, Batman had generated the identity of S9, aside from the Japanese origin of the same name, giving the boy the identity of a student transferred from abroad through the Wayne Foundation study program. The same program that he as Bruce Wayne had implemented for similar cases and that he used with the boy to make his appearance at the academy believable and that he was linked to the Waynes. This allowed him, as Bruce Wayne, to act as the boy's guardian at all times, removing that responsibility from any other member of the League, although Dinah and Oliver would likely soon take on the role of the boy's adoptive parents legally. All the paperwork had already been submitted and was slowly being signed. Naruto stopped in his tracks. He lowered the sheet of paper and frowned slightly as he tried to comprehend the map. In front of him was a huge hall waiting for him, completely filled with students from all grades. Girls with skirts above their knees and red sweaters. Boys with dress pants and sweaters of the same red color. With the enormous letter G on the chest, those clothes, in the clone's eyes, were the worst attempt at representing a uniform he could conceive. Even the change of shirt Connor wore to present himself as Superboy slightly surpassed it. Although he would never understand how Connor and Superman were forgotten when they became their civilian versions. The same versions that didn't hide their faces and only changed their personalities in front of the rest. Humans were, in a way, too forgetful. Naruto realized this when Wally's volatile thoughts came up, though the boy thought at a speed few normal humans could achieve. Figuring out how Wally devised a chess strategy against him was something he didn't think he'd figure out anytime soon. It would only give him a headache and he wouldn't truly understand Flash's partner at any point, which would be a complete waste of time on his end. He wasn't good at understanding anyone's thoughts or emotions, much less someone who was thinking 1,000 things at a time. Maybe that's where Wally's hyperactivity came from, or so Naruto thought about his partner. But by that same token, was he human? He didn't talk to anyone about his feelings beyond Dinah and Imra, who were acting as his therapists at all times. His blood was primarily Superman's, with traces of other living beings that weren't necessarily human. He discovered this when he used the Martian Manhunter's powers against Amazo, or when his strength surpassed Connor's, indicating to him that he had DNA from other heroes with super strength. These traces were what pushed him in combat and made him much stronger and more resilient. Hence his rivalry with Connor, who didn't stop his envy and confusion, which he directed at him with intense glances during constant training sessions. The touch made him stop. Naruto was brought out of his thoughts by the light touch. It had been like a small brush, as if a fine drop of rain had touched him. Any normal human wouldn't have noticed that touch. But he noticed it almost instantly and turned to face the person causing it, or rather, the person causing it. Fiery red hair cut through any thoughts he might have tried to formulate at that moment. Flaming emerald eyes made him open his mouth slightly. With a thin face accustomed to smiling, the girl gave him a smile that would have stopped any normal male heart. As a Kryptonian, he simply reconnected his mind to his body in time to appear normal before those huge eyes staring back at him. In his mind, only a second passed. "You're new," the girl looked Naruto straight into his blue eyes in a melodious voice. They were a complete contrast. His sapphire blue and hers emerald green, something she found funny while the boy recovered from the shock. Perhaps only a second passed in the Kryptonian's mind. But as Batman's partner, she perceived every movement and gesture the boy made while he looked at her, immediately capturing the moment when the oxygen stopped reaching the blonde clone's lungs. "You didn't ask." Naruto showed no feigned surprise at the girl's terse two-word statement. When she moved her lips, he immediately sensed her lack of hesitation by the lack of trembling in her words. She spoke with complete confidence, and Naruto picked up on it in less than a second, just in the same time she realized he was stunned by her beauty. He wasn't an idiot, of course. "I know all the students at the academy." She ran her eyes over the clone. She immediately recognized that the small uniform wouldn't last long covering that muscular body. They weren't exaggerated muscles, like Bane's, and they weren't even swollen and defined like Superman's. They were, somewhere between those two extremes, aesthetically defined muscles, with the perfect hardness and not unpleasant to look at least for her, who could currently admire them as they spoke. "Are you lost?" Naruto scratched the back of his neck and twitched his lips in an embarrassed grimace. He hadn't wanted to admit that, yes, he was completely lost in that academy. Maps weren't his thing, despite probably knowing every corner of the world. The girl's light laughter made him look directly at her. She laughed lightly, gently covering her mouth as she did so, still staring at him with those two green orbs that never seemed to leave his. "I don't even know how I asked that," the girl shook her head. Ever since she saw him, she'd known he was completely lost. That's why she approached him. Seeing him move his head, searching for the exact direction he should go to speak to the principal. "You're completely lost, and I ask a stupid question." "Well, yes, I admit it," the clone admitted his small mistake, giving the girl a smile that showed the genuine embarrassment Naruto felt at that very moment. "I'm lost. Could you help me a little, please? I need to find the principal's office and..." Swiftly, the girl took the map from the clone's hands and turned it into a simple ball of paper before the teenager's eyes. Naruto only opened his mouth slightly and closed it when the reed threw the ball and it landed in the nearest trash can. I'll walk you. My class is near the principal's office and helping a soul in distress is my daily job." The girl tapped her left heel against her right foot and began walking, passing Naruto. "Follow me, will you? I don't want to lose you. Or for me to lose you, in this case." Naruto watched as the girl turned her back on him and walked forward, passing by some students. Regaining control of his body, which seemed to have disappeared for a few seconds, the clone walked behind the girl with long strides, catching up to her a few seconds later, although he had to step over some other male students. "Any hobbies?" "Sorry." The girl looked at Naruto and back again. At Gotham Academy, every student had a hobby that they made public as soon as they entered. The clearest examples were those students with sports-related hobbies. The football team had achieved a good winning streak last year, and now they had to start over. Unfortunately, they didn't get off on the right foot. "Every student has a hobby," he raised his right hand in front of the clone's confused eyes. Wagging one of his fingers, he pointed at a golden blonde girl wearing a tiny uniform. "A cheerleader. They usually cheer on our players at games and also tend to have romantic relationships with them. Although it's really more of a carnal relationship." "That." "Hex," she cut Naruto's question short with a simple, straightforward word. As one of the academy's most perfectionist students, she had rejected more than one invitation from some of the academy's male students, which saved her from ending up in the restrooms, doing other types of activities in which she caught more than one of her classmates and friends. They usually have it from time to time in the locker room or the bathrooms. "And you haven't done it?" Naruto asked, drawn to the possible answer. Well, his best friend was Wally. The weight of being his best friend fell on the shoulders of Megan, the Martian teenager with raging hormones, who had her binge-watching countless teen romance novels, in which the boy and girl formed completely loving and intimate relationships on many occasions. And her friend's words brought to mind images from those series that took her Martian companion out of the earthly world. "Do you see me like that?" It was, in every way, a question that completely amused her. She didn't expect the boy to ask that very thing. No one ever did that the first time, of course. "I don't know," Naruto shrugged. "I don't know you well enough to get a good idea." The two stopped right in front of a thick wooden door. "But I'd say no." "Smart boy," she tapped Naruto on the right shoulder. The blonde clone looked down on her, raising a single eyebrow. "I'll leave you here, big boy." By the way. I'm Barbara Gordon. Standing there, Naruto watched as Barbara walked away without looking back, passing through the students. The clone admitted that Barbara Gordon had awakened certain things in his body that he couldn't quite understand, but that he wouldn't fully seek to do so. He looked back at the door and, very carefully, took the handle and entered the room where, sitting in a huge leather chair, a woman was waiting for him. "Sir, Madam Headmistress." Blonde curls fell over a sharp face. Lavender eyes looked at the student sharply before a slight smile spread across soft flesh-colored lips in an invitation to be kissed. "You're Mr. Uzumaki, aren't you?" The headmistress stood up from her position. Naruto, like a normal teenager, couldn't stop his own eyes and looked at both mounds hidden by a black suit jacket. "I'm the headmistress of Gotham Academy. You can call me Morgan." Chapter 12. Gotham. Unlike other cities in the United States, Gotham City had a high crime rate that surpassed many cities around the world. Corrupt and dark, Gotham was not a city for people who desired happiness. On its streets, day or night, crimes could occur at the least expected moment for its inhabitants, who, by now accustomed to it, simply waited for the police to appear or, in the case of many civilians, the appearance of the Dark Knight. Batman. Gotham was cold and dark at night. But that darkness and coldness didn't come from the night, for even during the day the city seemed to expel outsiders from its streets. The people of Gotham were cool, calm, and enjoyed their moments of peace until another tragedy struck the city and its protectors emerged from their hiding places to protect them from the imminent danger. However, due to the movements in CADMUS and the discovery about the cloning facilities found in the scientific center, Batman along with the League had intensified their movements and investigations on all CADMUS facilities in search of more possible clones of the Man of Steel. Superman, determined not to let any more of his clones be created, took the lead in that mission, while supported by the rest of the League, which meant that Batman himself was currently at the Watchtower, leaving Gotham under the protection of his two apprentices in the face of any potential difficulties the city might face without him there. Batman wasn't trusting. Gaining her trust could be a difficult task for the countless people in the world. The two Gotham teens under his care were among the few people the Bat respected in the world and for whom he would give his life or allow them to take care of his city, as he considered Gotham his own to protect and thus prevent more people from suffering what he suffered. But Gotham was never without its problems. "Batgirl. Do you copy? I'm on your left, Robin." Dick Grayson looked to his left. Wearing his ordinary uniform, the young boy wonder had left the team for a while to protect Gotham. With the League searching for more CADMUS bases around the world, Batman hadn't had time to give them some missions to complete, which was making their time on Mount Justice unfulfilling. A figure fell onto the roof of the building to Robin's left. Red locks stirred in the wind, and green eyes lifted to stare at the enormous column of smoke rising into the sky. With the bat symbol on her chest, Batgirl walked to the edge of her roof, mimicking Robin's steps. Both young men stood at the edge, looking down at the street. "Wait, Killer Croc. Seriously?" Robin didn't ask anyone in particular, but his surprise was genuine, driven by an anxiety that sought answers. Didn't Batman catch him last time? Batgirl didn't answer that question. The young woman brought the binoculars up to her face and focused the lenses on the villain known as Killer Croc. His real name was Waylon Jones, not Killer Croc. Unlike guys like King Shark, the man wasn't a metahuman, as some might think. From a young age, Waylon was struck by a strange disease that turned his skin reptilian, giving him that humanoid crocodile-like appearance that seemed to be the result of some genetic mutation. Something that was certainly true to a certain extent. A lot of villains have been attacking the city lately. Do they know Batman's missing? The heroine created her own line of thought. Robin had been with the team for the past few months, and she alone had been protecting Gotham from most of the criminals and villains who had been around the city. This led her to fight the likes of the Penguin, Black Mask's men, Professor Pig, and various lesser enemies they had stopped at some point during their time as heroes. Maybe it was all connected in some way. Could there be someone behind it all, and were they being worn down for some kind of important event? But that's weird. Robin pointed out, watching Killer Croc destroy what had previously been a taxi. That's when the teen's eyes widened. "Shit. Batgirl. What? There's no need to. Mira." Batgirl stopped her lecture to the younger boy. Hearing the urgency in her partner's shout, she looked to where Robin was pointing with his right index finger. Just behind the taxi previously destroyed by Killer Croc, a young girl was huddled, completely filled with dread at her possible death. Any thoughts that might have entered the young woman's mind were completely overwhelmed and nullified by just one. The thought of the young woman's death at the hands of that monster. Killer Croc wasn't just any villain they could face, and it was strange that he was on the surface, in plain sight, wreaking havoc that would bring him no benefit and only trouble. They did not have the strength or speed to act now. Lust. Fruash. Both Batgirl and Robin watched a blur move swiftly. This blur passed between Killer Croc and the young teenager, enveloping the latter and making her disappear from the villain's reptilian eyes. Killer looked at it in confusion, blinking several times and being, unknowingly, imitated by his enemy's apprentices. Croc. The creak broke the tense silence. Can you move? Get away from this place. Killer Croc sniffed the air. He growled gutturally at the scent that filled his nostrils and turned his head at the sound of that young voice. His eyes narrowed at the back covered in a white school uniform t-shirt. Ah yes. Good, the sound of rustling fabric followed that word. The young man waved his arms in front of the young woman, turning his back on the villain. In less than 10 seconds, a tie fell to the floor. Go home now. Please be careful on the way. You. Killer Croc growled at the words of the superhuman. That was my prey. Mine. She was mine to devour, mine to scare the bat with. She was going to be mine to bring terror to Gotham again, to bring back the reminder of my existence. He's even made me deaf. Can you shut him up? Slowly, the young man turned to face the villain. Without his tie, his shirt collar was disheveled, slightly raised, giving the boy a rebellious appearance, which, combined with his messy hair, gave the complete impression to anyone who looked at him. That's a pleasure for me. Naruto stared at the figure of Killer Croc several feet away. Today was going to be a normal day like any other. He had a late-night chemistry class, and his mind seemed to be adapting to the normal things of a normal Gotham teenager. So why had a giant humanoid lizard destroyed his perfect day? There was sunshine, no clouds, and birds were flying in the sky. And all his peace was destroyed by that scaly-skinned guy who almost devoured a mere girl. Nomi ignores. Following a crunch of pavement being struck by his tail, Killer Croc launched himself at the Superman clone. Naruto didn't react in time and took the villain's charge, being pushed against the building right behind him. Crack. You bastard. Waylon Jones looked into those blue eyes behind his claw. There was no emotion, no sparkle. His prey always feared him, and that young man with super speed didn't seem to even think he was going to die. Why? Why didn't he think about death while he squeezed his skull with his claw? He couldn't imagine anyone fearing him. That wasn't what he wanted. Have you stopped daydreaming or something? Naruto pushed Killer Croc's claw away from his face with his right hand, twisting the lizard's limb to the opposite side. Why isn't this a game? Swift and devastating, the hybrid's fist buried itself in Killer Croc's stomach. A groan escaped the villain's lips. Air was lacking in his lungs, and pain soon coursed through his core. Oh, have you learned to control the force? Yes. Night workouts with. Still don't know what to call the blonde. I'd say she's your mother. Naruto retracted his arm. With the other, he was still holding Killer Croc's arm. What is a mother? I'm not going to answer questions from humans. Feeling the air stir, the 9th generation clone swung his free arm toward Killer Croc's movable tail. Naruto painlessly stopped the limb with his hand, generating a small ripple of wind as he struck. Little shit. Naruto closed his hand over the limb. A crunching sound accompanied Killer Croc's roar of pain, creating a grotesque rupture that filled the clone's sensitive ears. Bastard. Killer Croc swung his free arm. His tail didn't work, but his other upper limb could. Seeing the movement, Naruto released the reptilian's tail at the same time as he released the villain's left arm. Using his left arm, he stopped Killer Croc's right arm and, using his left, launched a direct punch against the villain's chest, sending him crashing into a small clothing store. I heard his bones creaking again. Some of his internal organs are probably destroyed. Does he have regeneration or something? The dust settled. A crunch. A growl. Killer Croc emerged from the rubble, glaring at the clone with furious eyes. It had inflamed him. He could feel his blood boiling beneath his tough skin, and the urge to gut that boy was soaring. I'm going to kill you. HMP. Villain and hero stared at each other. Killer Croc bared his sharp teeth, reddened with blood. Naruto kept his face impassive, a perfect representation of Batman. Any ideas? He had many ideas for how to answer that question. Reptiles were very susceptible to the cold. His strength and speed were superior to that humanoid reptile's. He could kill him. But the League would go after him as if he were a rabid dog, so killing the villain wasn't on his agenda. Ruling out that plan, all that was left was to freeze Killer Croc completely, leaving him in an icy block that no one could grab to free him, perhaps by throwing him into the sea. But how could I achieve this? Naruto looked at Killer Croc's figure. Using his freeze breath was out of the question, as he didn't have a freeze breath to use like Superman. Unlike Superman, he possessed a scorching breath that could undoubtedly melt Killer Croc or at least roast him, something that was out of the question, because it was linked to the villain's death. And he didn't know the full range of abilities he possessed. Intangibility, superhuman speed, endurance and strength, heat breath, super hearing, those were his powers up to the most recent date. So what could he use? Nothing that would completely destroy Gotham, or Batman would hunt him down all the way to purgatory itself. And I would hate to be chased by Batman. I'm going to kill you for taking my food. You bastard. Killing him wouldn't be bad. Naruto's brow furrowed. He would have killed Killer Croc without hesitation before. Even now, he was thinking about it, but was it entirely necessary? He was a Superman clone. Dealing with a guy like that should be easy for him. A metallic clinking noise caught Killer Croc's attention, accompanied by Naruto's own nod. Two explosions engulfed the lizard, covering it in an immense cloud of white smoke. That is nitrogen. The clone looked up at the sky. Two shadows loomed over him, forcing him to squint as two figures fell upon him. He recognized one of them immediately, while the other seemed vaguely familiar. Robin. Naruto relaxed his posture. I figured you'd be here, being Batman's sidekick. I'm not your sidekick. I'm your partner. It's the same. It's not the same. Robin stabbed the super in the chest. Stop using words if you don't know their meaning. If you both stop comparing each other's man parts. Batgirl walked between the two, earning a growl from Robin, while Naruto frowned at the voice he could recognize without a doubt. We need to keep this guy frozen. And locked away if possible. Slowly, the whitish mist faded. Where Killer Croc should have been, there was now an icy statue in the shape of Waylon Jones himself. The villain was captured in the ice, stretching out his arm and opening his jaws. Naruto would have laughed if he were a normal young man. Robin did, taking on Killer Croc's pose like a dramatic one straight out of a movie. He's alive, Batgirl declared, breaking Robin's laughter with a sharp look. He'll be in torpor for a while, in hibernation. We can move him to a prison or something. An arm encircled the figure around the waist. Then I'll take him to the bottom of the sea. Naruto flexed his legs. He stomped hard, shifting his right leg back. I'll be back in a second. 1 second. The golden flash. Both young men saw a golden flash before seeing their companion again at their side. That was literally a single second, a blink of an eye. I don't want another Kid Flash. Chapter 13. Flash's speed was the greatest speed a mortal could reach, only if he could obtain the powers of the League member. This ability had been replicated almost perfectly in the 9th clone of the CADMUS S series, the speed being reduced to a point where it became stable, indicating that the clone possessed the powers of the Flash himself, but not being so. In order to match or at least be as fast as a Flash, S9 had to combine his Kryptonian genes, those of the Amazon and those of the Flash himself, to achieve the speed of a super speedster like Killer Flash himself. Of course, this speed was never equal to Flash's, being actually in a position too inferior in the table, and when he said that he would return in a second, it was simply a way of pointing out that he would return fast enough to think that it had only taken a second, leaving the time it took him to reach Killer Croc at 1 minute and 27 seconds, a time too high for someone who could run at a speed close to the speed of sound, maybe equal. This fact, as well as the confrontation with Killer, was directly reported to Batman, who had previously pointed out how important it was to keep an eye on the second Superman clone. Not because he didn't trust him, but because he had been conceived with the DNA of different heroes, one of them being his own, which made the clone who had joined the team much more dangerous. He was dangerous if he truly replicated the thoughts, the ideas of Bruce Wayne aka Batman. Being paranoid, Batman had come up with a perfect plan to stop his own League members, all of them. If the boy could replicate him, the danger would be much more real than he initially believed, but he still wouldn't do what Clark had done, leaving the boy helpless, alone. Doing that would be even more dangerous than showing him some affection, as Dinah and Oliver were trying to do with the boy. It was always better to have him on his side than on the other side, on the side of the owners of CADMUS. And there was a premise that bothered the Bat. The boy had been the product of a long line of clones in a project, apart from the other Kryptonian boy who looked like Superman. He had been marked as the S9 of that enormous list, which made him wonder where the other 8 were. Had they been enormous failures, and that was why the boy was the only one to wake up? Were they hidden elsewhere in CADMUS, in another facility? Would they be used to recover the S9 and destroy the League in its attempt to evoke that failure? It was the most appropriate thing to do. Create an army of superhumans to be able to defeat the most powerful group of heroes on the planet, to defeat the symbol of heroism. Superman. It was the clearest objective. Connor and Naruto were an attempt to replace the strongest man on the planet, the symbol of peace on Earth. What did you call me for, Batman? The Watchtower featured many rooms, both hidden and visible, so that League members could hold secret meetings among themselves, so that information could not escape those walls. Batman had insisted on creating a complex system of rooms so that, if the enemy ever took over the Watchtower, he wouldn't be able to discover all the possible hiding places they could use to hide or conceal themselves from the enemy. Dinah Lance closed the door behind her. The echo of her heels masked the sound of the door closing, but it didn't take Batman's attention away from the monitor he was looking at. On the screen, a DNA helix could be seen. The different parts were highlighted, showing a photograph of a different hero that Dinah identified when she stopped in front of the monitor. Didn't you already have all the information on the boy? Constant analysis is what can give me a weapon to stop him if necessary. Or to understand the full extent of his powers. Superman's strength combined with Wonder Woman's. Martian Manhunter's intangibility. Batman's complex mind, his constant distrust. He had now displayed speed similar to the Flash's. The data was passed on to him by Robin, given to him by his boy Wonder. You shouldn't treat him like a specimen, Batman. You're treating him like he's an experiment, an animal to be studied and dissected in your mad scientist lab. He has feelings. He's a boy, for God's sake. Why do you and Superman have such a hard time understanding Connor and Naruto? The anger she felt was reflected in her words. Dinah kept her eyes completely on Batman and he didn't even give a hint of hearing her. His gloved hands continued typing, writing something on the screen. I'm not treating him like a laboratory animal, Dinah. The sound of keys being tapped stopped completely. I'm not even studying this thoroughly to defeat him or find a weak spot. Knowing his powers, I'll be able to improve this. What is this? The image of the DNA helix was replaced with an image of a dark suit with a large deep orange S taking the uniform worn by Superman. Batman created a tactical uniform that he could outfit Clark's clones in. The super suit. One for the boy you care so much about, Dinah. The specifications appeared seconds later. Fireproof, underwater, capable of absorbing the force of fists and converting it into kinetic energy. I took one of Slade Wilson's suits to create this one. Capable of repelling Superman's own blows and returning them in a direct counterattack using kinetic force, Batman spoke slowly. Dinah swore she heard the pride in his voice. Even Connor would have trouble with his clone brother. How many of these suits are there? Just one. I've spent a portion of my resources on the suit. I'm not going to give it to just anyone. Dinah raised one of her eyebrows. You're planning on giving it to Naruto, right? You really care about someone who's technically a carbon copy of you. Their mind is yours. Their distrust is yours. Naruto is a lot more like you than he seems, and you've realized that. You want to care for him like you do Batgirl and Robin, don't you? You're quite the sentimentalist, Batman. Calm down. I won't say anything, but you owe me something. But the team. A day at the beach. A day of rest. After the events with Amazo, Batman had given in to Dinah's pressure and granted the boys a week off, a few days at the beach to clear their minds and not be so stressed. During this time of rest, at Wally West's insistence, the Superman clone known as S9, Naruto, had finally joined them. Kid Flash himself had given the clone his name, making it stand out from the rest because it was an exotic, strange Asian name. No matter how hard his classmates tried to find out where he got the name, he never said where he got it. The other members of the team had joined this outing. Megan and Connor, who had started a small relationship or something similar, at least in the eyes of most, although these two and Wally didn't seem to notice, Calder and Wally, who had been the main ones in charge of forcing Naruto to attend the outing, and finally Dick, who still hid his face behind his small mask so that no one would know who he was. Robin was forced by Batman to make the boy work harder with his teammates so he could keep an eye on Naruto and tell the Bat everything. Although this part was only put in so Dick would actually go to the exit, something Batman never told his pupil. Because some of the boys attended different schools, they couldn't see each other properly and bond as a team. This outing also strengthened the boys' bonds, especially Naruto's with the rest of the team. To which Dinah did not object, despite the thoughts and voice in the mind of her ward and soon-to-be adopted son. And Artemis. Are you drooling over her yet, Wally? Naruto and Wally had taken two sun loungers and covered by two huge umbrellas they watched the others playing in the water or making sand castles. No. A noticeable blush appeared on the red-haired teenager's face. Wally looked away and focused his eyes on the sea, on the movement of the waves. It was true that he had been a little distracted ever since Artemis appeared, but so much so that even Naruto noticed. Yeah. I don't know much about feelings, but I can see that tough girl attracting your attention even more than Megan. She's very attractive. She has a good body and she's a girl with a lot of character, maybe too much, I'd say. What do you mean by S? Are you interested in her too? No. I don't know what interest is in these situations. So I couldn't tell you if I am or not. I've never experienced being interested in another person, sorry. You sound like a robot. I can be. The sigh escaped the speedster's lips. At least it was better to talk to Naruto than to Connor, who was being even less communicative than his namesake. No, that's not necessary. Red Tornado is sufficient, thank you. That joke had no effect. Naruto still remained completely impassive, staring directly at him in a way that made Kid Flash sigh. Look, leave it. There are still so many things I have to teach you, like a good joke and humor in general. Sometimes I forget you're like a baby. One that could crush you. Calder appeared behind Wally. Don't scare me, fish with legs. I'm going to kick your ass, Wally West. The Atlantean handed to Uzumaki an ice cream popsicle, which the clone accepted with some hesitation. None for me. Pimples on the ass don't eat. Laughter reached Wally's ears. The speedster frowned and crossed his arms over his bare torso, a source of ridicule from his teammates. Here. I don't like it anyway. Naruto held out his ice cream to Wally, who watched this gesture without saying a word, surprised by such a kind gesture from a person who didn't know feelings. Target found. We're taking action. The clone's reaction was swift. Connor grabbed Megan by the waist and Naruto forced Wally and Calder to the ground. A beam of energy shattered the lounge chairs, creating a furrow in the sand and splitting the sea itself for a few seconds. S9. Naruto opened his eyes. He crossed his arms in front of his face. Surrender yourself to CADMUS. And he met the first of the attackers head-on. He was dressed in technological battle armor, with an S on his chest, a deep orange, almost red, glowing with each blow. The clone parried the second of the punches, blocking his enemy's fist with his hand, generating a wave of wind. You could hold back a little. Give yourself up. Naruto launched a hook directly at the soldier's stomach. It passed through the defenses, shattered the suit, and sent the enemy flying into the skies. Even with such a high education given by the Genimers, it has not given your mind the proper identity, S9. Naruto looked at the second of those soldiers. From her body type, the clone deduced she was a woman. She had a slim build, prominent breasts, and her voice was somewhat higher pitched than the first soldier's. But it doesn't matter. You have to choose. Them or you. All the members of the team had been subdued, restrained on the ground. Even Connor had been held back by that strange group with the S's on their chests. What do you decide? Chapter 14. The Watchtower was the League's new base, its center of operations in the event of alien invasions or large-scale villainous movements. It hadn't been visited by any member of the team in recent times, and access was strictly restricted after the recent events, leaving only those belonging to the official League team. This also blocked access to the teenagers and many other heroes who weren't part of the group. This caused the rejected heroes to look with confusion at the actions of the Justice League members. But this action was orchestrated by the team's mastermind, Batman. Since the events between the CADMUS clones and the team on the beach, Batman had adopted a thoughtful and calculating attitude regarding what had happened. The images of the severed bodies of that extraction team were still in his mind and in the minds of other League members. The cause of all the commotion was currently being held in one of the Watchtower's cells, being guarded by Black Canary and Martian Manhunter. Superman had dismissed the matter, stating that he had already reported what had happened, and Wonder Woman was a little shocked by the same, as she hadn't believed she had seen such brutality inflicted by a mere teenager. Although, considering the boy was a clone of Superman himself, it shouldn't have been too strange. He had invulnerability, super strength, and super speed. The fact that he had managed to destroy the attackers should have been the least strange thing they could see on his part. In shackles, surrounded by green kryptonite, the clone called S9 and known as Naruto was imprisoned in that cell, being watched over by the woman who saw him as a son or younger brother and by Martian Manhunter, one of the heroes who had been copied in his DNA with one of his powers. Intangibility, an ability that had been very useful to him to defeat the men who attacked them on the beach, destroying his only moment of rest in a few months. Although it is not as if he would have killed them for that. His mind disconnected after being threatened with a choice between his friends and him, and it came back online shortly after. And what his eyes saw for the first time were his own hands stained with the blood of those 3 attackers from that small squad that Batman had dubbed a rapid action extraction squad. But knowing that he wasn't the one who directly caused it didn't make him feel any better. He did cause those men's deaths, and at the same time, he didn't do it. He doesn't know how he did it. His mind is muddled. Imra Ardeen stopped in front of the cell, standing between Black Canary and Martian Manhunter. Saturn Girl was designated as the person capable of entering the mind of the Superman clone, being the only one who had succeeded so far and the only one who had not been rejected by the boy being held there. What exactly happened? Did you see it in his mind? Any fragments? No further than what the entity in your mind has allowed me to see. I saw the arrival of the group of mercenaries, all of them with the S marked on their uniforms. They turned out to be clones from the same chain as Naruto. Project S. That was the reason the team was so easily defeated. Connor wasn't experienced enough to deal with 3 Kryptonian clones, and the rest hadn't anticipated the attack. If they couldn't handle Naruto at first, with 3 clones similar to his teammate, the victory percentage dropped to a complete negative. But why go so far as to kill them? Martian Manhunter understood the boy's actions, he might even have supported them. Those guys had put him between a rock and a hard place, forcing him to make a choice. Adding the boy's lack of experience and emotional maturity to the equation, it created a ticking time bomb. One that ended up exploding in the villains' faces. What if it wasn't him? The echoing footsteps halted the hero's conversation. Batman appeared on the scene, holding a tablet. You should see this before you judge him. Superman should see this before he goes crazy. The Dark Knight extended the device to his companions, and they took it. Moments before. Happy Harbor Beach, Rhode Island. The threat was delivered like a slap in the face. The three men stood their ground, watching the boy they were to take back to one of CADMUS's bases on the Light's orders. That person, that clone they wanted back, was even superior to Connor Kent, the second Superman clone. So, kid. It's you or them. They were looking for an answer. They pressured him. By keeping the team under control, they kept the clone under control. They threatened him, pressured him into a decision, into a choice Superman would make. The safety of his teammates before his own. What the minds of those S-Network clones didn't understand, or what their superiors didn't register, was that the clone they were trying to capture and return to CADMUS control wasn't Superman. He didn't have a complete understanding of good or evil, and he didn't have a restriction on his powers that prevented him from killing his enemies, from executing them in the face of a threat. Bubbling with strange energy, a layer began to emerge from the teenager's body, enveloping him completely like a waterproof cloak, like a full bodysuit. The heat emanating from the cloak twisted the air, rippling it and creating a strange sight for those who stared into it. Answer. The woman took a step forward. She dropped the unconscious Calder onto the sandy beach. Impatience was not a good advisor, and the girl was feeling it. Like a rodent, anger began to slowly devour her. Now. The words died away, accompanied by a painful moan. Naruto grabbed the woman by the neck without looking at her. In a second movement, he slammed her into the ground, crushing her head and causing her skull to explode. 10. If you don't mind, the boy is asleep now. He won't be the one to spread some love and affection. He's a coward. Instead, I'll be the one to prove that you can't just try to hunt him down like a dog. But hey, I'll be a bad fox, okay? Naruto Kurama moved swiftly toward his enemies. The second clone met him squarely, using his body as a shield. The collision generated a massive blast of wind that sent the deck chairs flying backward through the air. We're taking you to CADMUS 9. That's something I'd like to see, you little shit. The shadow loomed over the clone. With a powerful left hook, Naruto Kurama slammed the clone into the ground, causing a slight tremor that alerted the civilians, who believed it might be an earthquake shaking the city. Leave it. Lightning bolts shot out of the third clone's visor. Naruto Kurama raised his arm, taking the photon blast directly against his limb, and was briefly separated from the second clone. I have those things too. He inhaled. He inflated his lungs. He exhaled. A powerful flame engulfed the third clone, who was forced to close his eyes by the sudden flare, something he shouldn't have done. Using his legs, Naruto Kurama leaped toward the third clone. Taking advantage of the moment when he looked away, the blonde clone grabbed him by the head and tore it off like a wild animal, staining his naked torso with the clone's steaming red liquid. He really wouldn't do this. Slowly, the second clone was getting to his feet, catching his breath at the same time. That's why I'm doing this. I can take control of this body whenever I want, whenever I need to. It's really fun, exciting. I can use a body other than my own and destroy shit like you. You're clones, I know it, I can smell it. They tried to replicate my power, my essence, in you. And it's not something I'm going to allow. Not from those filthy humans, from those unwary mortals. Red eyes stopped the second clone in its tracks. He stood paralyzed, staring at those slitted pupils, those blood-red eyes, those elongated nails. Dark marks appeared on the clone's cheeks, resembling the whiskers of a fox, like well-defined scratches on a savage face. His teeth grew like fangs, sharp and pointed. This. A dark feeling fell over the second clone. As if he were deep in the sea or high in the sky, his lungs searched for oxygen as if they urgently needed it. He seemed desperate, a drug addict in an oxygen suit. No one can replicate the essence of death itself. No one can replicate what I am, a small copy of Superman. The bubbling cloak condensed for a few seconds. Naruto Kurama took a deep breath and the cloak began to concentrate, disappearing seconds later, as if someone had made it disappear, but leaving the essence of death. I control my power. I will destroy your body with a single blow, destroying everything you are directly with my hand. The second clone focused its gaze on S9. Its eyes glowed intensely, gathering energy. Like the third clone, the second one prepared to attack Naruto with its energy. Those tricks aren't new. It won't work. Just die. Floosh. But the energy didn't come from the second clone's eyes. Instead, the S9's arm grabbed the clone's head with a swift direct movement, tearing it from the body with speed greater than a clone could use. This was too easy. Naruto Kurama took the communication device from the second clone and brought it to his lips. Next time, careless humans, try to actually kill me. These copies will simply be erased. I'm coming for you, Boldy. Let me know in the comments below if you guys want the next part. Also check out my other video that has been shown in left. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video please like and share this video. And have a fantastic day. Bye.